Full Metal Storm, Battle of the Machines. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 395, Nursery. In an instant, Luo Yan flew up. Unfortunately, he was wearing a seatbelt, so he did not leave the driver's seat. Although he was shocked, he calmly activated the jets and the Air Wing 3 aircraft after the mecha was fired. He also switched the Air Wing 3 aircraft to manual operation mode. The bun shook violently and stabilized the body in mid-air. In the cockpit, Luo Yan just breathed a sigh of relief and saw the clouds and fog surging in front of him. In the thick clouds, lightning flashed, and there was a huge black shadow. It seemed that Kun hit him again. Before Luo Yan could react, the thick clouds in the panoramic window disappeared, and a huge water ball floating in the air suddenly appeared in his field of vision. The water ball seemed to be affected by the anti-gravity organ, so it could float in the air, just under Kun's body. From under Kun's body, there were countless hair roots of different sizes and thicknesses. Those hair roots were either entangled together or floating alone. They went deep into the water ball and tied a cocoon bubble at the end. Before Luo Yan could see what was in the cocoon bubble, Kun had already crashed into it. Seeing that the bun was about to crash into the water mass, Luo Yan quickly turned on the mecha diving mode. Immediately, on the holographic screen, the exhaust port information on the mecha plan changed from open to closed. The next moment, the bun entered the water mass and entered the zero gravity zone again. Luo Yan turned off the jet and the aircraft, then controlled the mecha to catch a root hair and used it to leverage and fall to the end of the root hair. Soon he arrived at the end of the root hair, near the cocoon bubble. From the outside, the cocoon bubble didn't seem to be very big, but when he got closer, he found that this thing was terrifyingly large. It was at least 40 or 50 meters long. Inside the cocoon bubble, there was a tadpole-like creature curled up in a ball. The creature was grey-blue all over, and although it looked like a tadpole, it already had a pair of small white fins. Luo Yan couldn't help but gasp. These tadpoles were obviously the young of Kun. This huge mass of water turned out to be a nursery. So it seems that Kun came to the ground to find a place to give birth. Luo Yan's heartbeat suddenly accelerated. There are tens of millions of hairy roots in this huge mass of water. Under each of them is a cocoon bubble, which has a young Kun. Then there are thousands, or even tens of thousands of young Kun in this water mass. Don't let it give birth. Luo Yan's scalp tingled. The thought of these tens of thousands of young Kuns being born smoothly, the scene is simply unimaginable. He immediately raised his sword to pierce the cocoon bubble. But then he thought, there are so many cocoons here, how long will it take to pierce them one by one? Luo Yan looked at the hairy roots in front of him again. This thing is connected to the cocoon bubble, which should be an organ like an umbilical cord. In other words, at the end of these hairy roots, there should be an organ that provides nutrients to the cocoon bubble. If this organ is found and destroyed, these young Kun can be killed at the same time. Luo Yan raised his head suddenly, and the Wu-Wang burning eye was turned on. In his eyes, the world became a simple drawing outlined by lines. The lines in front of him, indeed, all converged to one place at the top and gathered into an organ like a sea anemone. These hair roots were like the tentacles of the sea anemone. Luo Yan didn't waste any more time and controlled the mecha to climb up along the hair roots. Although in the water, it was not difficult to climb up in a state of zero gravity. In a moment, Luo Yan had reached the end of the hair roots, and it was impossible to climb up here. Going up further, it was the organ like a sea anemone. Luo Yan looked up and observed that the size of this organ was amazing, like a small island. It was probably impossible to penetrate it with the machine gun of Bion. Only unique skills could be used. Luo Yan narrowed his eyes slightly and then let the mecha release the hand holding the hair roots, allowing the mecha to float in the water. The long sword Fian was in hand, and the Yuanli rose and then exploded. Secret method, KO and wheel. When you need to maximize the attack power, the secret method of KO and wheel is the simplest and most brutal. Now, with the amplification of the KO and wheel, the Yuanli rising around the mecha is like an underwater volcano erupting. It is surging and magnificent. After a moment, a white rainbow shot up from the water mass. The silver-white light curtain, as thin as smoke and as aurora, rushed forward at a high speed, cutting through countless airy roots and penetrating into the anemone-like organ. Luo Yan did not stop. One long rainbow disappeared, and another long rainbow rose again. He used the unique skill 4 times in a row. Luo Yan stopped. At this time, there was a rumbling sound above the water mass. Countless hairy roots were cut off by the rainbow light, and the cuts were smooth and dislocated. In a blink of an eye, light blue liquid gushed out from the cross-section of those hairy roots. The hairy roots began to wither rapidly from the cut surface, and quickly spread to the cocoon bubble at the end. Bubbles suddenly appeared in the cocoon bubble, and then the young kun inside seemed to feel something, struggled desperately, and bit through the bubble wall, in advance to get out. But after leaving the bubble wall, those things stopped moving after only a few seconds and died quickly. Then, the anemone-like organ on Luo Yan's head suddenly tore open several huge and deep holes. Large pieces of light blue liquid gushed out from those holes. At this time, even those hairy roots that had not been cut off began to wither. In the cocoon bubble at the end, a tadpole struggled to break through the wall and then died in the water mass. Seeing that the water mass below was full of young kun corpses, Luo Yan breathed a sigh of relief. Next, he was ready to leave the water mass. After using the unique skills 4 times in a row, his yuanli had dropped sharply. It would be difficult to have an outstanding performance in the next battle. But destroying this nest of young kuns was a great achievement. Luo Yan was not greedy and planned to return to the Forbidden Land to watch and destroy some more anti-gravity organs. At this time, from the blue liquid that was diffused above, several tentacles covered with barbs suddenly rolled over like lightning. It immediately wrapped around the Bayan, and then suddenly retracted and lifted it upwards. In the cab, Luo Yan's whole body was shaken violently. Whether he looked through the panoramic window or opened the Wuwang burning eyes, he could only see a blurry light and shadow. It was not until the mecha shook violently that the feeling of rising disappeared, and Luo Yan looked out with a Wuwang burning eyes. According to the outline formed by the lines around him, he seemed to be pulled into Kun's body, located in a certain organ. At this moment, Luo Yan felt a sense of tightness in his neck, hands, feet, waist and ribs. He looked down and saw that it was the tentacles that were wrapped around the mecha's body. At this moment, they were coiled like pythons, and they were getting tighter and tighter, trying to crush the mecha. Luo Yan immediately controlled the cannon on the mecha's shoulder, turned on the yuanli attack mode, and then fired at the nearest tentacle. Bright beams of light cut through the space, illuminating the darkness outside the mecha, and blasting off a tentacle. Suddenly, one of Luo Yan's arms was free again. Bayan immediately swung his sword and cut off the other tentacles. The mecha immediately fell down and landed on the ground the next second. Chapter 396 Anchor Fleas. Beams of light turned on, illuminating the surrounding space. Luo Yan looked out from the panoramic window and saw that the mecha was surrounded by squirming tissues and barbed tentacles rolling towards the mecha. Bayan swung his sword to cut off the tentacles while looking for a way out. Luo Yan opened the Wuwang Zuan and looked out. He saw that the tissues and organs in Kun's body were everywhere. They were so dense that they blocked the space. The chamber was still shrinking. It seemed that Kun was planning to pull the mecha into his body and crush it. But soon, Luo Yan found a hollow pipe. He didn't know where it led to. No matter how the tissues in the chamber changed and squirmed, the pipe remained in its original state. The height and width data marked in the field of vision showed that it was completely able to accommodate the mecha. Immediately, Luo Yan controlled the mecha to run towards the pipe. After running a short distance, the chamber began to vibrate violently, and a sharp roar came from somewhere. The sound entered the chamber and poured into Luo Yan's ears. Several dragon scales on his body immediately floated up, and his body functions were enhanced to resist the impact of the sharp sound. As the sharp sound sounded, the tentacles in the chamber that were wrapped around the mecha burned one after another. But if you look closely, you will find that it is not a real flame. It is more like the rising flames produced by the energy in the tentacles being stimulated. These flames seem to stimulate the potential of the tentacles, making them thicker and stronger, and more barbs appear at the same time. The speed of these tentacles suddenly increased a lot, whistling towards the Bayan. Luo Yan could only use the machine gun on his shoulder, otherwise it would be difficult to cope with the explosion of so many tentacles with just a long sword. For a while, the whole chamber was illuminated by the flames on the tentacles. The flames were dazzling, but they could not interfere with Luo Yan. Wu Wang's burning eyes naturally filtered out these lights, so Luo Yan could clearly see that on one side of the chamber wall, a huge biological grey light was approaching in the flesh and blood tissue. Luo Yan glanced at the giant beast radar, but there was no response. He didn't know if it was affected by some ability of Kun, or if that thing was not a giant beast. However, the ability could interfere with the radar, but it couldn't interfere with Luo Yan's eyes. His red eyes, which were filled with circles of fire, looked at it intently. Soon, a line of information appeared in the grey light of the creature. Anchor flea mother. Anchor flea mother? Is this the mother of the anchor flea? Luo Yan's pupils dilated slightly. The biological grey light of the mother was larger than that of ordinary giant beasts, and it was full of oppression. The pressure was already catching up with the previous giant beast that he had never met. Luo Yan suddenly used a combat skill and chopped down with his long sword, bringing up countless thunders. Thunder. Kaienjin. Under the suppression of thunder, the tentacles were shattered one by one and quickly burned to charcoal. After getting rid of the nearby tentacles in one go, the body of Bian became transparent again. The hypernuclear matrix activated the stealth characteristics of Teoti, making the mecha disappear in the chamber. The mecha disappeared, and the many tentacles that swept over from all directions again suddenly jumped around like headless flies. It was because, when Luo Yan used the stealth of Teoti, he also cooperated with Ki Owlin, so that the mecha no longer emitted a trace of breath. Taking the opportunity, Bian went to the place where the passage was. The hollow passage was extremely spacious, just like a tunnel in and out of the dungeon, which could easily accommodate a mecha. Although he didn't know where the passage led to, it was better than staying in this dangerous place. Just when Luo Yan came near the passage, he saw the biological grey light of the queen insect finally broke through the cavity wall tissue and appeared in this shrinking space. The tissue of a cavity was seen to wriggle and separate, and then a wrinkled, deep-lined, old woman-like human face squeezed out of the tissue. Although Luo Yan had seen many strange things, his heartbeat was still slightly faster when he suddenly saw a human face appear in Kun's body. Then a group of black shadows emerged from the tissue. It was the body of the queen insect. Its body was huge, and some blood-colored mucus and nerves floated on the surface. They wove a robe and put it on the queen insect. The queen insect with the face of an old man was not a human body under the robe, but a body similar to that of a beetle. Its abdomen occupied half of its body, which was large and round, and its insect shell was bulging and shiny. From the upper body of the queen insect, two skinny brown spotted human hands stretched out from the mucus robe. Under the human hands were 3 rows of insect legs. These things looked very hard and covered with hard hairs. The lower body has no legs, but a large number of tentacles. Those tentacles wriggle like an octopus, strong and powerful, allowing the mother insect to wriggle in Kun's body easily. At this time, the mother insect's face, which looked like an old woman, was covered with wrinkles. Her eyes had no whites, her eyeballs were black, but her pupils were green. The green eyes were shining, and from a distance, it seemed as if 2 balls of green flames were floating. When the anchor flea mother insect completely entered the chamber, Luo Yan saw that behind it, under the flesh and blood robe, there was a long tail. Attached to the tail were countless grey and white insect eggs of different sizes. Those insect eggs were so dense that they were piled up together, enough to drive people with trypophobia crazy. A small figure could be vaguely seen moving in the insect eggs. Occasionally, when the insect eggs broke, pale and almost transparent fleas with no gender characteristics would float out. After the mother insect entered the chamber, it seemed to be searching for something, and its wrinkled face looked east and west. It didn't see anything, but the mother insect didn't give up, and suddenly opened its mouth and let out the same sharp roar as before. When it opened its mouth, a tongue extended from it, and the front of the tongue opened a mouthpit, emitting a silent whistle, faintly resonating with the scream. Suddenly, the queen insect burst out with a terrible evil spirit, and the many tentacles in the chamber became more violent, lashing around frantically. Snap! One of the tentacles accidentally hit the Bian. Although the mecha was revealed, the contact between the tentacles and the body outlined an unnatural shape. The queen insect looked over suddenly, and the long tail behind it whistled and swung, and the many insect eggs on the tail were thrown out, making them hit the bind like a cannonball. Luoyan immediately lifted the invisibility, and at the same time, the KIR wheel switched to the KON wheel. Suddenly, the Yuan force burst out, and the bind rushed into the hollow passage like a fly, and ran away quickly. Behind him, he heard the queen insect's roar, and then there was a vibration on the ground, and it was obvious that the queen insect was chasing him. Luoyan immediately activated the Air Wing 3 aircraft, switched to manual control mode, and controlled the mecha to fly off the ground. Immediately, the flames from the aircraft illuminated the passage, and as the mecha roared away, the halo reflected by the flames also faded away. Chapter 397, Sword Shadow on the Lake. The passage was not smooth. Not only were there ups and downs, but there were also large and small tissues sticking to the passage. In the cockpit of the Bion, Luoyan used the Wuwang burning eyes to always find these roadblocks first. He would dodge those that could be avoided, and use machine guns to smash those that could not be avoided. Behind him, there were constant roars. Obviously, the queen was still chasing. Luoyan was helpless about this perseverance, and he didn't want to waste time stopping to fight the queen. So he turned on all the jets of the mecha, and with the aircraft behind him, the speed of the Bion increased greatly. A circle of light in the passage quickly faded away. The sound of machine guns never stopped. Luoyan swept all the obstacles in front. After a while, he saw the exit, and immediately stabbed the long sword into the pipe tissue on the side. As the mecha went away, a long cut was made in the pipe tissue, and blood suddenly poured out of the wound like a mountain torrent. I don't know if it was because of the injury, but the passage suddenly shook violently, and then shrank rapidly. Fortunately, the exit of the passage was in sight. Luoyan continued to bombard the tissue, blocking the way ahead with machine guns, and flew out before the passage was completely closed. The anchor flea queen was not so lucky. The giant insect with an old human face was not slow, but no matter what, it could not catch up with the mecha using flying machines and jets. Bion had already left the passage, and it had only crawled halfway. At this time, the pipeline tissue contracted and closed, and the queen had no time to react, and was wrapped by the tissues on both sides. Then, under the movement of the flesh and blood tissue, it was squeezed back, and fell back into the original chamber. Looking at the tightly closed passage, the old woman's face let out a sharp roar, but there was nothing she could do. The closed passage would not open for a moment, and the anchor flea queen turned a few times, and left the chamber. The other side of the passage. Bion came out of the passage. At first, Luoyan looked out from the panoramic window, and saw that everything was dark. But after a while, he found a faint light below. He looked down, and saw that, after coming out of the passage, he came to a larger space. He didn't know where he was in Kun's body at the moment, but he could see that this space was quite wide, and there were cartilage tissues supporting this space like pillars. The waves below were like a big lake. There were things like sea anemones in the deep water of the lake. Those things emitted a faint light under the water, thus illuminating the water surface. There was actually a small island on the water. It was not a biological organ. It was a real island. There were green plants, trees, and a temple on it. There was such a thing in Kun's body. Luoyan had never dreamed of it before. This was incredible. He controlled the landing height of Bion, and fell towards the island. When he got closer, he found that the temple on the island was simple in shape, but the building was very large. It looked like it was not for tiny creatures like humans to worship, but for giants as tall as mechs. Bang! The mecha landed on the island, and the flames of the aircraft and the jet disappeared. Luoyan turned on the lights outside the mecha, illuminating the surroundings, as if it were daytime. He used the Wuwang burning eyes in the mecha to observe the surroundings, but did not find any giant beasts or parasites. As for the mother insect, it seemed that it would not come for the time being. At this time, Luoyan exclaimed softly. In the field of vision of the Wuwang burning eyes, he saw a piece of gilded light on the water surface. The strange thing is that this piece of golden light is not underwater or on the water. It only exists on the water surface, as if it is a reflection of something. Now Luo Yan knows that his divine treasure can always find some special light, such as the white light of the Teichu stone fragment, the strange light of the dragon and tiger energy, etc. Now this piece of gilded light that only exists on the water surface should not be a simple thing. He simply turned off the Wuang Zuan and controlled the mecha to walk to the shore. Looking out from the panoramic window, he saw the shadow of a long sword reflected on the water surface with dim light. This long sword has a solemn shape, the sword body is full of golden colors, and in the middle are engraved with words that Luo Yan can't understand. Those symbols are very similar to Teisu patterns, and they may be the words in Giksu. Luo Yan immediately used some functions of the mecha to take pictures of the reflection of the long sword on the lake and save them. He thought that after returning, he would ask Lin Wei to interpret it to see if he could find out something. Then, he observed the sword shadow on the lake again. The length of this sword shadow is amazing. If the shadow and the real object are in a 1:1 ratio, then the mecha can be used. Since it is a reflection, there should be a real object. The sword shadow appeared on the lake, and the real object should be above. Luo Yan immediately controlled the mecha and shone the light upwards, but he couldn't find any real object after searching continuously. He didn't give up and turned on the Wuang Zuan to scan the surroundings. After a busy time, he still got nothing. Luo Yan suddenly felt strange. If there was no real object above, where did the sword shadow on the lake come from? Could there be something else in this sword shadow? Thinking of this, Luo Yan controlled the Bian, squatted on the lake shore, and reached out to the lake surface to touch the sword shadow on the lake surface. The palm of the mecha reached into the lake water, and nothing unusual happened, except stirring the lake water and making the sword shadow in the water distorted and blurred. In the Wuang Zuan, looking at the layer of gilded sword shadow that only existed on the lake surface, Luo Yan continued to try. This time he showed his Yuanli to see if he could resonate with the sword shadow in the lake. The Yuanli rose, and the virtual shadow of the mountain and the sea appeared. The mecha reached into the water again, and there was still no change. Just when Luo Yan was about to give up, suddenly, his virtual shadow of the mountain and the sea shrank suddenly, and when it expanded again, it turned into the virtual shadow of the Yuanshan. Under the amplification of the mecha, the virtual shadow of the Yuanshan was like a god, with heavy armor on his body, and a green dragon wrapped around his waist, and swam up to his right arm. The shadow of the Yuanshan seemed to be attracted by the sword shadow on the lake, and actually reached out his hand, and probed into the lake. When the hand of the shadow touched the lake, the symbols on the gilded sword shadow shone with golden light and vibrated. The next second, the sword shadow on the lake flashed and disappeared on the water. Gone. Luo Yan sat in the cab, and was stunned for a long time. Then he felt his Yuanshan shadow, but found nothing unusual. Suddenly he felt strange. Where did the sword shadow on the lake go? In his Wuang burning eyes, he could no longer see the magical light on the lake. Luo Yan shook his head, and could only retract the Yuanshan shadow. Then he controlled the mecha, and turned to walk towards the temple on the island. This island and this temple could not be something in Kun's body. It seems that Kun swallowed the temple and the island together. The island is not big, only a few miles long and wide, and the mecha reached the temple in a few steps. The temple had a peculiar style, and seemed to be an ancient object. No one knew what material it was made of. It had been in Kun's body for a long time, but it had not been corroded. It was just slightly dilapidated. The mecha lowered its head slightly, and walked in through the door. When the light shone, suddenly, a figure in the dark bumped into Luo Yan's sight. Chapter 398. One flower, one world. Seeing the shadow, Luo Yan was calm. Before entering the temple, he used the Wuang burning eyes to stare at the ancient temple. He had already seen through this grand ancient temple, and was sure that there was no living creature inside. So he was not panicked when he saw the shadow. Sure enough, as the external light of the mecha shone, he found that the shadow was actually a figure on a mural. It was a woman, wearing a gorgeous long dress that seemed to be decorated with stars in the sky. She was standing on the back of a whale with wings, and was reaching out to pick something. The woman's face was unusually blurry, with only a golden vertical pupil that was extremely clear. If you look closely at that golden pupil, you will find that it is drawn by dense and layered golden lines. Looking at it for a while will make people dizzy. Luo Yan stared for a few seconds and felt nauseous and wretched. He quickly closed his eyes and operated the visualization technique. After a while, he returned to normal. When he opened his eyes again, Luo Yan did not dare to stare at the golden pupil again. He looked elsewhere. First, there was the whale under the woman's feet. The whale had bird-like wings, and its body was deep blue. Its wings and fins were like waves, emitting colorful light. Luo Yan said thinking that it was Kun. If so, then the woman in the mural was not simple. Being able to step on Kun as a mount, she was definitely not an ordinary character. Looking at the rest of the mural, there was a figure on each side of the woman, but for some reason, these two figures became blurred and difficult to identify. It was only barely possible to see that the two figures were men. One was burly and majestic, wearing armor, and countless ancient symbols appeared on the armor, similar to the Tesu pattern. The other was slender and elegant, wearing a long robe, which was light and agile, and surrounded by clouds and mist, as if he would ascend to the sky at any time. These two figures were standing a head shorter than the woman with golden eyes in the middle. Obviously, in the painter's mind, their status was slightly lower than that of the woman. In addition, the two male figures all had their backs to the woman in the middle, and both stretched out their hands to pick up something. Luo Yan controlled the mecha, and turned on all the lights. He could immediately see clearly that behind the three figures, there was a towering tree. The tree was densely covered with branches and leaves, and it looked like there was nothing special, except that it was huge. But there seemed to be something on the leaves and branches. It was just too small for Luo Yan to see clearly with the naked eye. So he used a computer as an aid to enlarge one of the leaves. He immediately saw that between the veins and textures of the leaf, there were actually buildings, pavilions, birds and animals painted. Luo Yan looked at the giant tree again. If the other leaves were the same, then wouldn't it be that a leaf was a world, a flower, a world? At this time, with the help of the lights, Luo Yan also saw the three figures stretched out their hands to pick a kind of fruit from the giant tree. It was a fruit that looked like a peach, but with gorgeous colors. With previous experience, Luo Yan also enlarged the fruit. Then I saw that the fruit, which looked like a fairy peach, depicted the Milky Way and the stars, as if it contained a universe. Three figures, towering trees, leaves and fairy peaches that contain the world or the universe. What exactly does this represent? Who left such a mural? Just as Luo Yan was shocked by the giant mural, the ground suddenly shook, and then there was a sound of water splashing. Luo Yan hurriedly looked outside the temple, and saw that the lake outside the temple was boiling. Controlling the mecha, and walking out of the temple, he saw groups of liquid floating on the lake. Large and small water groups were affected by something, and flew into the air. Luo Yan raised his head, and saw that the flesh and blood tissue above had a tendency to open up. Could it be that Kun wanted to breathe? If so, it would be a good opportunity. Luo Yan looked into the temple and thought that he probably wouldn't have the chance to come again in the future. Fortunately, he had taken photos of the murals in the temple and saved them. When he returned, he would give them to the giant beast strategic house and he should be able to exchange them for some contribution points. When thinking like this, the vibration became more obvious. Large groups of water droplets now connected together, forming a stream of water, rising against the current, like a school of fish returning to the sea, and falling into a hole opened by the flesh and blood tissue above. Luo Yan didn't want to miss the opportunity, so he immediately turned on all the jets, started the aircraft, and flew to the hole above with the water flow. At this moment, in the Changping Core command, on the big screen, the number of biological organ clusters destroyed gradually approached the ideal value. 383,941. The reading continued to rise, and people saw hope. Jiang Wuoyang's face also gradually smiled. At this time, a monitor shouted, "There is an abnormal movement in Kun's body." Jiang Wuoyang's heart sank when he heard it. Could it be that Kun is going to discharge high temperature airflow again? The previous exhaust and the flip. Many mechas were thrown out of the forbidden area. If it happens again, I don't know how many mechas are left. Notify all machines. Let everyone be prepared to resist the impact. So soon, Liu Yan, who was in the cockpit, heard the instructions from the commander on the command desk. I don't know if it's because his mecha is in Kun's body, so the sound is intermittent, but Liu Yan still noticed the keywords such as exhaust and impact. In an instant, dragon scales appeared on his body one after another, and his eyeballs turned black, except for his pair of red pupils. Dragon transformation posture. Activating this posture, Liu Yan's body functions have been qualitatively improved. Then he circulated his yuanli, released the mysterious art, and tried his best to improve the defense of the mecha. The next second, he felt a violent vibration. The strong vibration seemed to shake all his bones apart. Liu Yan was sure that, if he hadn't practiced viewing mountains and seas, and hadn't reached the advanced level of mecha masters, such a vibration alone would be enough to make them faint. Although he hadn't reached the advanced level, his body was extremely strong at this time, because of the improvement of the dragon transformation posture. Although he was uncomfortable with the shock, he didn't faint. But the next second, Liu Yan felt an extremely hot breath gushing from below. There was no need to activate the Wuang Shikuan at this time. He looked out from the panoramic window and saw that the outside world was already red. The water that had previously flowed upstream from the lake had now all evaporated and turned into surging water vapor. Immediately, everything outside the panoramic window was blurry. Liu Yan activated the Wuang Shikuan and was able to see the situation outside clearly. At this time, the body of the Bian was already glowing red, and the temperature on the surface of the body was frighteningly high. Fortunately, this body used the Ming Snake Scale armor. The Ming Snake Scale armor's high defense and durability performance was finally reflected at this time, and coupled with the protection of the mountain and sea phantom, the body did not explode on the spot. Even so, Liu Yan still felt the burning discomfort, as if he was thrown into a boiling oil pan, and every breath was spitting out heat waves. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399, Escape. Liu Yan, who was in the mecha, was like this. At this time, the surface temperature of the Bian was so high that one could imagine the body of the aircraft was able to withstand the high heat because of the Ming Snake armor, but the Air Wing Type 3 aircraft was not. Although the outer shell of the aircraft was also made of high temperature resistant materials, it was not as good as the Scale Snake armor. Soon the surface of the aircraft had already shown signs of melting. After a while, flames burst out from the inside. In the cockpit, an alarm sounded on the command console, and the computer prompted that the aircraft was heated and on fire. Liu Yan didn't care about much, and quickly pressed the decomposition button. The device connected to the aircraft was automatically released, allowing the aircraft to detach from the body. As soon as the Air Wing Type 3 aircraft left the body, it was rushed up by the high temperature airflow, and the speed of ascent was faster than that of the Bian. In the surging heat flow, the aircraft kept spinning, and more flames were ejected from the inside. Finally, it suddenly expanded and deformed, and with a bang, it exploded into a huge fireball. The fireball quickly dispersed the airflow, and the Bian passed through the debris of the aircraft. The collision between the mecha and the debris made a constant clanging sound. In the violent vibration, Liu Yan suddenly had a wide field of vision, and when he looked again, he was already in the air. Bian was ejected from Kun's body, and the mecha flew out of control to the high altitude of the forbidden area, flying towards one of Kun's dorsal fins. Kun's dorsal fin was like an undulating mountain range. If it hit it, the consequences would be unpredictable. In fact, it was not just the Bian mecha that was thrown into the sky and hit the dorsal fin. Long before Liu Yan, there was already a mecha that was carried into the air by the heat flow and exploded after hitting the dorsal fin. Supported by the dragon transformation posture, Liu Yan's body was strong, and he did not lose consciousness due to the vibration and rotation. He gritted his teeth and calmly started the jet. Immediately, several jets on the left side of Bian spewed out raging flames, gradually offsetting the force of the body's rotation. When the machine gradually stopped, Luo Yan looked back and saw the dorsal fin that was almost endless in front of him. He immediately activated several other jets, and with the help of the propulsion generated by the jets, he left the dorsal fin in an instant. At this time, Kun's exhaust movement finally stopped. The Bion was no longer in the air. The mecha passed through the mist and fell towards the ground of the forbidden area below. Luo Yan opened all the shock absorbers. The next second, the jets of the machine were turned off, and the Bion fell to the ground of the biological matrix in a squatting posture, causing the surrounding ground to shake slightly. When the machine stopped shaking, Luo Yan breathed a long sigh of relief, released the dragon transformation posture, and looked outside. The ground of the forbidden area was billowing with smoke, but it was soon blown away by the strong wind in the sky, revealing the undulating land-like hills, and one anti-gravity organ after another. Luo Yan looked at one of the organs marked by the computer, and was about to continue the second stage of the battle. He suddenly turned around with a thought in his mind. Bion turned around and raised his big shield, Taishan, just in time to block an anchor-headed giant flea that was charging from behind. This was a male flea with a huge and powerful crest. It hit the shield with a loud noise, causing Bion to sway. The giant flea bounced back, and Bion took a step forward, slashing down with the long sword in his hand, splitting the parasite in half. At this time, Luo Yan saw that anchor-headed giant fleas emerged from the thin smoke all around. Male fleas charging, female fleas floating, and there were dozens of them. Perhaps because he had just opened the dragon transformation posture, Luo Yan's eyes flashed with a hint of hostility at this time. The machine gun on Bion's shoulder roared, and a long flame spurted out of the muzzle, blasting out a torrent of metal, lashing through the flea group like a red-hot whip. The panoramic window was illuminated by the light of the artillery fire. Wherever the fire whip passed, the insect swarm was shattered, and blood and flesh flew everywhere. This scene further aroused Luo Yan's ferocity. Bion flashed into the flea swarm, slashing with the long sword, and the other hand occasionally stabbed into the giant fleas and dug out their internal organs directly. A giant flea head rushed fiercely, but was held down by Bion with one hand, and then the machine gun blocked its head. Bang 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 bang. After several shots, the giant flea's head exploded, and the yellow and green liquid inside splashed all over the mecha. Under Luo Yan's almost crazy killing, dozens of giant fleas were quickly killed. When there were no enemies in front of him, Luo Yan slowly exhaled a breath from his mouth. His eyes regained calmness. He looked at the panoramic window covered with blood and meat scraps, stunned for a moment, and then turned on the cleaning function of the mecha's exterior to clean the liquid and meat scraps on the window. Afterwards, Luo Yan returned to the work of cleaning the anti-gravity organs. In a flash, dozens of organs were destroyed by him. Suddenly, Luo Yan felt a shudder. Before he could think, his body reacted in advance. He activated the stealth feature of the Teoti, making the mecha transparent in the air and never seen again. At this time, a red spectrum signal appeared in the radar of the giant beast, and this signal was approaching rapidly. Luo Yan made a prompt decision and turned around and left. With his current level of Yuan Li, the chances of winning against the upper level giant beast were too low. Not long after the Bion left, the wind was surging, and suddenly a black shadow fell to the ground. It was the golden rhinoceros beetle from before. The insect compound eyes on the head of this giant beast turned, and its sight fell on the corpses of the giant fleas in the distance. The giant beast looked around, and couldn't find an opponent, so it immediately let out a roar of unwillingness. Luo Yan, who was far away, vaguely heard the roar. He had a blank expression on his face, and controlled the Bion to continue to move away. He stopped, only when he could no longer hear the roar of the giant beast, and lost the sense of crisis. At this time, a prompt appeared on the computer. Organ cluster found, 758 meters away. At the same time, an orange spectrum signal appeared in the direction of the organ cluster. There is a mid-level giant beast at the organ cluster. Luo Yan opened the Wuwang burning eyes, and sure enough, near the organ cluster in the distance, there was a group of biological grey light discs sitting on those petal-shaped organs. Soon the computer matched the signal, and found that it was a ZHI shell snake. This two-headed snake was sitting near the organ cluster, whether by accident or intentionally. With it here, it would not be so easy for ordinary mechas to attack the organ cluster. The two heads of the two-headed snake kept looking around, spitting out snake tongues, very alert. Suddenly, the giant snake seemed to sense something, and both heads looked in the direction of Bion at the same time. Almost at the same time, a thin silver-white haze rushed forward at high speed, passing between the two heads, across the body of the two-headed snake, and sank into the diamond-shaped crystal column of the organ cluster at the rear. The next second, a violent shock wave followed, setting off a storm, blowing the body of the two-headed snake and the fragments of the crystal column into the air, fluttering and scattering all over the ground. Chapter 400, Supporting Each Other. After destroying the two-headed snake and the organ cluster with one strike, Luoyan exhaled and glanced at the holographic screen. With the destruction of this organ cluster, the total number of clusters destroyed has reached 56. The goal is about to be achieved. At this time, the voice of Jiuying, the chief of staff of the Underground City Command, rang out in the communication channel. Everyone, there are still 4 to go. Put on more effort. We don't have much time. Kun has now descended in altitude and is about 1,100 meters away from the ground. In addition, it will approach the underground city in 5 minutes. We have to shoot it down before it approaches the underground city. Hearing this information, Luoyan's heart tightened, but there were no other organ clusters nearby. He could only destroy some anti-gravity organs to increase the underground city's slight chance of winning. He destroyed while moving away. He was worried that the disappearance of the organ cluster would attract the dangerous upper-level beast. It was wise for him to leave. Just after he left, the golden rhinoceros beetle came again, and naturally got nothing. However, this time, the golden rhinoceros beetle had shortened the distance. Maybe next time, Luoyan won't be able to get rid of it. After running for a while, Bion suddenly heard gunshots and explosions coming from the front. At this time, Luoyan scanned several mecha signals. The signal showed that there were signal mechas of the Changping Corps in front. Probably the other party also scanned Luoyan's mecha signal, so a communication request appeared in the communication channel. After Luoyan accepted the request, a voice rang out. This is the 2nd Squad and 6th Team of the Changping Corps. I'm the Mecha Division Mengfangxi. We are surrounded. Request support. Request support. It turned out to be an acquaintance. Luoyan didn't care about the previous unpleasantness at this time, and said in a deep voice, I'm from the Guangling Corps. Please hold on. I will be there soon. But in a moment, Luoyan saw a dense swarm of parasites in front of him. A large number of anchor-headed giant fleas surrounded the ground. There were so many that Luoyan's scalp was numb. But he did not hesitate. The machine gun immediately opened fire. A huge gunshot rang out. The hot metal torrent blasted into the insect swarm, causing the parasite swarm, which was like a storm, to have blood and flesh flying everywhere and falling to the ground. Attacked by the Bion, the insects quickly split into a group and pounced on him. Luoyan calmly raised his shield and used the energy absorption characteristics of the Teoti to resist the beams fired by countless female fleas. The machine guns on the shoulders of the mecha did not stop for a moment, maintaining a powerful firepower, but the computer prompted that, if the attack continued at this speed, the ammunition carried would be used up in 20 seconds. Luoyan just pretended not to see it, and continued to attack, smashing the giant fleas that acted as the vanguard into pieces. With the Bion attracting part of the flea swarm, the mechas of Marshuo and the other two had a chance to breathe. Seeing that Luoyan's machine was about to be surrounded, he was already very tired, but Marshuo still shouted, let's go and meet up with the brothers in Guangling. At this time, if they left Luoyan behind, the chance of escaping would be greater. But Marshuo didn't even think about it, and as soon as he moved, the other two machines followed suit. At this time, Luoyan's ammunition was finally used up, and the machine gun overheated and stopped firing. Suddenly, the panoramic window was full of giant insects whistling back and forth. These insects hit the Bion crazily, but fortunately the Ming snake armor was extremely hard, and the hypernuclear matrix had the energy absorption characteristics. As a result, although Luoyan was surrounded by the insect swarm, he was like a magic needle that stabilized the sea, and no matter how the insect swarm attacked, he would not fall. At this time, the computer prompted that the machine had absorbed enough kinetic energy, and Luo Yan immediately released the kinetic energy that had been accumulated. But the scales on the outer armor of the bind opened slightly, releasing strands of faint light from inside. These blue lights gathered together to form a circle of blue light, which suddenly spread in all directions. In an instant, wherever the light ring passed, the anchor fleas were violently impacted, and the parasites closest to the bind were directly deformed and exploded. Those farther away were also blown away by the impact, whistling away like rootless duckweed. Marshuo and the other two who came to support saw a flash of blue light in the distance outside the panoramic window, and then the parasites surrounding Luo Yan were like straw blown away by the wind. Some died, some flew away. They were cleared out in an instant. On the ground there, the big shield was lowered, revealing a silver-white mecha standing with a sword. At this time, the residual blue light after the mecha released kinetic energy was still wandering, dissipating into a faint flame, reflecting the mecha as majestic as a god. Is it him? Meng Fanxi recognized that it was Luo Yan's mecha, and immediately felt complicated. In the other side of the cockpit, Luo Yan quickly checked the status of the mecha. The mecha only had 1/3 of its energy left, and it could still move for 27 minutes. All the ammunition was used up, and even the impact kinetic energy accumulated by the supernuclear matrix was released. In addition, his own energy was running low, and Luo Yan began to think about how to leave the forbidden area in the sky. At this moment, the forbidden area in the sky shook violently, and then the earth tilted, as if Kun was diving into the ground. Then on the computer screen, the number of organ clusters destroyed exceeded 60, showing the number 62. The second phase of the combat goal has been achieved. Kun's anti-gravity field can no longer be maintained, and the giant beast is now descending, and is about to land on the ground. Please leave the mecha in the forbidden area immediately. It's time to evacuate. Luo Yan's heart sank. His aircraft exploded before, and now it would be difficult to leave the forbidden area with just the jet. Meng Fanx's voice rang out in the communication channel. Where is your aircraft? Luo Yan said in a deep voice. It exploded. Marshuo immediately said, Xiao Meng, let's each take one side and hold his mecha. 2 aircraft may be more difficult, but if we just want to get out of the forbidden area, it should be possible. Mecha Master Xiao Rong said, Captain, let me and Xiao Meng do it. Your mecha is not light and consumes more fuel than mine. Marshuo made a prompt decision. Okay, I will escort you. After the decision was made, Xiao Rong and Meng Fanx's 2 mechas, one on the left and one on the right, hugged the Bian. Then the aircraft ignited, spewing out a thick stream of fire, pushing the 3 mechas including the Bian into the air. In the cab, Luo Yan's body was shaking, but he still said in a deep voice, thank you. Marshuo's voice sounded, it's too polite to say these things. You just helped us out. Although we are not in the same corps, we should support each other when we act together. This way we can go further and kill more monsters. As he spoke, the 4 mechas had risen into the air and left the forbidden area. From a high place, a huge black shadow was seen falling diagonally to the ground. In the rolling clouds, part of Kun's body could be seen, as well as the roar of the monster. Chapter 401 Plague God. There was chaos over the forbidden area in the sky. Not all mechas could take off in time. Problems of one kind or another prevented many mechas from leaving the forbidden area. At this time, mecha masters like Luo Yan were basically helpless and could only watch. Just then, he saw a golden light moving quickly in the forbidden area, shrouded in clouds and mist. A moment later, the golden light shot up into the sky, and it turned out to be a mecha with huge golden wings spread out behind it. That mecha was either holding or catching, or carrying or being caught by other mechas. It actually used the power of one mecha to hang a full 6 mysterious machines. Luo Yan's eyes were wide open. Isn't this power too strong? Moreover, the mecha was not equipped with an aircraft, and it seemed to fly into the sky by its own function. Captain, is that the captain's golden peng? Meng Fanx's voice sounded in the communication channel. Marshuo hummed, yes, that's the captain's magic machine Golden Rock. The full name is Golden Winged Dapping, and only it can do this. Just as he was talking, Xiao Rong's voice rang out, watch out, there's a swarm of insects behind us. Luo Yan looked back and sure enough, from behind their 3 mechs, a large number of anchor-headed giant fleas flew over. There were over 100 of them, and because there were too many insects, they gathered together, like a dark cloud. Meng Fangxi shouted, "Damn it, it's at this time." At this moment, he and Jiuying's mechs were unable to fight, because they had to carry the Bian. Ma Shuo said in a deep voice, "Leave it to me here. Hurry up and land." As he spoke, Ma Shuo's heavy mecha flew behind the mechs of Luo Yan and others. Ma Shuo threw away the broken shield, and a weapon rack behind the mecha moved, pointing a machine gun forward. Ma Shuo turned the mech in midair, facing the swarm, and then opened fire, sweeping the black cloud above. The bright and hot bullet stream swept away, and blood flowers suddenly bloomed in the black cloud, and the insects were swept to pieces. After a volley of bullets, the black cloud was obviously much lighter. However, at this moment, Luo Yan suddenly felt a sense of danger, and then a red spectrum signal appeared behind them in the giant beast radar. "Be careful," a red spectrum signal appeared. Meng Fangxi shouted, "Captain, behind the swarm. It's very fast. It has entered the swarm." Ma Shuo took a breath in the cab, and through the panoramic window, he saw a golden figure domineeringly crashing into the swarm. Wherever the figure passed, the anchor fleas were smashed to pieces, and the swarm of insects gave way, as if avoiding the plague god. As a result, Ma Shuo saw that it was a golden rhinoceros beetle, with its wings flapping at a very fast speed. This giant beast has a thick and sharp horn on its head, and strong arms and legs like humans. Of course, its limbs are also covered with a hard golden shell. There is no file in this giant beast's strategic house. It is unknown whether it belongs to a feathered insect or a shelled insect. The compound eyes on its head blinked, and it has seen several machines below, including Luo Yan. "Damn it." Ma Shuo roared, "I'll cover you, you go." He controlled the mecha, raised the machine gun, and pointed it at the golden rhinoceros beetle. The machine gun spewed out a long tongue of fire, and the bullets that flew out were no longer physical bullets, but energy bullets. The rhinoceros beetle blinked its compound eyes, and suddenly turned into a golden afterimage. Ma Shuo immediately shot into the air. "To grandma. This is too fast." Ma Shuo cursed, and at the same time, opened the missile compartment of the mecha. The computer was trying hard to lock on the rhinoceros beetle. Although the missile has no effect on the upper level monster, now Ma Shuo has no idea that he can blow it up. As long as he delays a little time, it will be good. When Ma Shuo attacked the rhinoceros beetle, Meng Fangxi's 2 mechas carried the Bian and flew to the ground. The ground was already under their feet. With a little more time, they could land. At this time, the computer finally locked the rhinoceros beetle, and Ma Shuo immediately launched missiles. Missiles flew out of the bomb bay one by one, and quickly swept towards the rhinoceros beetle. A golden light suddenly shot out from the rhinoceros beetle's body. Although the light was illusory and not real, it gave people a very hard feeling. It was the anti-membrane of the upper level behemoth. The anti-membrane of the behemoth can usually reflect some of the characteristics of the behemoth itself. Therefore, the properties of the anti-membrane of different types of behemoths are very different. Like this one, the anti-membrane of the rhinoceros beetle is not large. Compared with other upper level behemoths, the range of the golden anti-membrane can be said to be very small. It is only enough to support a golden sphere around the rhinoceros beetle. The next second, the missile launched by Ma Shuo didn't even enter the anti-membrane. It hit the layer of golden light and exploded into dazzling fireballs. The rhinoceros beetle suddenly flashed out from the flames and rushed straight to Ma Shuo. Ma Shuo's mind was blank. He knew that the heavy body was not flexible. Now in the air, it was a real target. "It's over. My 34 years of life will come to an end today. I haven't confessed my feelings to Jiuying yet. I don't know which bastard will get the advantage in the future." In an instant, Ma Shuo's mind was full of thoughts. At this moment, he heard the sound of the sea tide. But now he is in midair. Where does the sound of the tide come from? At this moment, the rhinoceros beetle that was originally heading towards Ma Shuo blinked its compound eyes on its head, turned a corner suddenly, and drew a golden arc of light. It bypassed Ma Shuo and suddenly came to the bottom of Luo Yan's 3 mechas. At this time, Ma Shuo turned around and saw that the Bian had revealed the virtual image of mountains and seas. The surging blue sea that enveloped the three mechs was making a sound like thunder. In the cab, Luo Yan saw the rhinoceros beetle below through the panoramic window. He secretly said that he was lucky. Luo Yan knew very well that Ma Shuo could not stop the rhinoceros beetle. He also thought that the rhinoceros beetle had chased him many times before. I'm afraid it has remembered his smell. So he practiced the skills and released the fluctuations of Yuan Li, which really attracted this thing. Luo Yan made a prompt decision and controlled the button to push away Meng Fang's two mechs, and then ignited the jets to accelerate the mechs to hit the rhinoceros beetle. This is the best choice under the current situation. It is to use himself to attract the attention of the rhinoceros beetle, so as to avoid several mechs being killed by this giant beast in midair. Luo Yan, Zhao Luo, Meng Fangxi and Zhao Rang exclaimed. They didn't expect Luo Yan to be so decisive. He pushed their mecha away without even a word of discussion and rushed in. Meng Fangxi snorted. He didn't need to hold the bayan. His mecha had his hands free, and he immediately took down the sniper rifle on his back. Then, with the help of a computer, he locked onto the rhinoceros beetle and infused it with energy, ready to support Luo Yan at any time. Chapter 402, Entanglement. In the sky, seeing the bayan falling towards it, the golden rhinoceros beetle's eyes flickered, and there was cunning in its compound eyes. Before the bayan approached, the rhinoceros beetle turned into a golden light and suddenly dodged. It didn't want to fight with the bayan. It seemed that it wanted the bayan to fall to the ground and be seriously injured, and then pick up the corpse. Seeing this scene, Ma Shuo and others were so nervous. Although Kun had descended in altitude, it was still 1,000 meters away from the ground. Even if the bayan was equipped with a jet, it would definitely suffer a certain degree of damage if it fell from such a high place. Originally, it was difficult for a Shenwei class mecha to win against the top level upper level behemoth, unless there was cooperation from teammates, or 2 or more Shenweis cooperated, there would be a certainty of victory. But that also needs to take into account factors such as the pilot's state and the energy reserves of the mecha. Considering that Luo Yan had already experienced a battle in the forbidden area in the sky, and even the Air Wing Type 3 aircraft exploded, I'm afraid that his battle was more intense than others. Luo Yan's condition must be declining now. When the mecha lands and is damaged, the chances of winning will be even lower. At this moment, bayan made a move that Ma Shuo and others could not understand. Luo Yan controlled the mecha to turn around suddenly in midair and stabbed the air with a sword. What is he doing? He is crazy. The mecha will fall apart if he falls like this. Ma Shuo and Meng Fangxi both cried out nervously. Landing on the back is not conducive to the mecha to make protective actions to reduce the vibration and damage caused by landing. Seeing Luo Yan turning in midair, it is no wonder that the two of them cried out in surprise. But at this time, Zhao Rang shouted, "Look, what's going on with that giant beast?" It turned out that below them, the golden rhinoceros beetle drew a golden light, circled around and pounced on the bayan. So the place in front of the bayan, which was only air just now, was now filled with the rhinoceros beetle's body. The sword that stabbed into the air pierced into the rhinoceros beetle's chest. The whole process happened very quickly, making people dizzy. As soon as Ma Shuo and Meng Fangxi finished their words, the golden rhinoceros beetle rushed up, as if it had delivered itself to Luo Yan to stab. The 3 mecha masters of Changping City were stunned and had no idea what Luo Yan was doing and why he could predict the opponent's actions in advance. In fact, when Luo Yan faced the rhinoceros beetle, he had already activated the prophet and established a light body model to predict the opponent's actions. Although the rhinoceros beetle is a top level upper level giant beast with a huge amount of data, it is not unpredictable. Especially since the giant beast had blind confidence in its speed, and it was difficult to make a move while moving at high speed. Luo Yan barely predicted the route of the rhinoceros beetle. He knew that the thing would move behind him to attack, instead of waiting for his mecha to fall to the ground as others thought. At this time, the long sword Fian pierced into the golden shell of the rhinoceros beetle's chest, but the shell was very hard. Even if it was a heavy-duty long sword, it only penetrated a small part. It was caught by the rhinoceros beetle with both hands. The giant beast never dreamed that it would be sent to be stabbed by others. Although the sword would not kill it, it scared it, and immediately became angry and roared, trying to push the long sword out. Luo Yan controlled the mecha, and his free hand grabbed the rhinoceros beetle like lightning, pressing its body, using the force to push the long sword inside, intending to poke a hole in the giant beast. Suddenly, the giant beast and the mecha wrestled in midair. The two sides were deadlocked. In this way, the bion was like hanging on the rhinoceros beetle. With the flying power of the rhinoceros beetle, the mecha stopped falling immediately. At this time, the distance between the mecha and the ground was only a few hundred meters. There was no danger in falling to the ground at this height. In midair, the rhinoceros beetle suddenly bent its legs and kicked the body of the bion. Luo Yan could no longer catch it, and the long sword was pushed out by the rhinoceros beetle, and the bion fell to the ground. Boom. The jet sprayed out raging flames, forming a driving force to slow down the speed of the body's fall. Finally, the bion fell to the ground in a squatting posture, causing the ground to shake violently, and then rolled over, pressing over a forest, pressing down the grass and trees in pieces. With the help of such protective actions, the body was finally not damaged too much. On the other side, the rhinoceros beetle swooped down, its chest scattered with debris, and its compound eyes flashed with anger. However, before it could pounce on Luo Yan, rays of energy light fell from the sky and landed in front of it, causing holes in the ground. The rhinoceros beetle suddenly stopped and looked up, seeing three other mechas descending above. One of them was holding a black sniper rifle and was shooting at it, allowing the sniper bullet condensed by the energy to hit its body. The rhinoceros beetle roared, and the thick golden horn on its head shone brightly, as if it was going to fight back. Suddenly, an invisible but twisted ripple collided with its horn, instantly knocking the behemoth's head off, causing a beam of light that was bombarding Meng Fangxi to deviate from the track and flash between the three mechas. The rhinoceros beetle's compound eyes blinked, and the figure of Bion was immediately reflected in hundreds of grids. Luo Yan controlled the mecha, and chopped with his long sword continuously, emitting invisible sword energy. He didn't expect that this level of attack could kill the rhinoceros beetle. As long as he could distract its attention and prevent it from attacking the Changping mecha in the air, he would achieve his goal. With the Changping mecha harassing it from above and the sword energy slashing it from below, the rhinoceros beetle was furious. Its whole body was emitting golden light, and its body was slightly swollen. The originally smooth surface of the insect shell suddenly bulged with red crystals. The rhinoceros beetle's breath suddenly surged, and a circle of waves suddenly spread, shaking the Yuanli sniper bullets and Luo Yan's sword energy above its head into pieces. The giant beast raised its head suddenly, vibrated its wings, and soared into the sky. It wanted to kill the annoying fly above first. Unexpectedly, as soon as it left the ground, it heard a thunderous sound of breaking through the air, and then its right foot tightened, and its body sank violently. The rhinoceros beetle looked down and saw that it had exploded its Yuanli and used the jet to propel itself. It caught up with it in an instant and grabbed its foot with one hand. Luo Yan used the secret method Wind and Lion, bursting with speed, and successfully caught one of the rhinoceros beetle's feet, then swung it down fiercely. Boom. Bang. The rhinoceros beetle was smashed to the ground by the bion, causing the ground to undulate, the rock layers to shatter, and dust to rise. The roar of the giant beast sounded in the thick smoke, and the rhinoceros beetle suddenly spun its body, and the huge centrifugal force immediately threw the bion away. The golden giant insect adjusted its posture, landed on its feet, and leaned forward slightly. One of its right arms suddenly swelled rapidly like a balloon, especially the forearm, which had swelled into the shape of a warhammer. Chapter 403 on the horizon. In an instant, all the red crystals on the golden rhinoceros beetle lit up, emitting a deep red glow, and it seemed as if flames were burning. The next second, the rising red light made a loud noise, like a thunderous explosion, roaring to the sky. This giant insect, just like humans using secret methods, used some ability or method to explode its combat power. At this moment, the momentum it released was so strong that it shook the earth and shocked Marshuo and others who were far away in the air, and they were almost breathless. After the combat power exploded, the rhinoceros beetle stepped hard on the ground with both feet, stepping out a circle of airings. The ground where this circle of airings passed, the earth and the trees were shoveled up by invisible forces and pushed backwards. As the airings grew and spread, the rocks and trees that were shoveled up from the ground were already tens of meters high. Bang! The airing exploded, and the tens of meters high, like a small mountain, instantly collapsed into powder, catapulted into the sky, and turned into a wave of stones. The moment the stone wave was lifted, the rhinoceros beetle flashed out from the airing, and the arm like a warhammer was raised, swung, and punched, smashing at the Bian. Luo Yan showed the phantom of the mountains and seas, and at the same time, raised the Taishan shield. Although he made a defensive posture, the mecha did not lower the center of gravity, but maintained a posture that could jump at any time. The rhinoceros beetle was very fast. Almost in an instant, it had arrived in front of the Bian, punched hard, hit the shield. In the cab, Luo Yan felt a violent impact. Fortunately, he had already emerged dragon scales in advance, and used the dragon transformation posture. Otherwise, at this moment, even if the empathy system had greatly weakened the nerve shock, it would still cause Luo Yan's left hand nerve necrosis. The huge and terrifying impact caused the central part of the Taishan shield to sink silently, and then the depression quickly spread to the entire shield. There was no sound, but the shield broke into pieces, and the fragments were ejected into the surrounding space under the impetus of the shockwave. Then, the left arm of the Bian bounced up uncontrollably, and the part with the shield hanging on it, the outer snake scales on the outside cracked, and electric sparks flashed in the cracks, and parts shot out. In the cab, Luo Yan's left arm instantly turned red, and the severe pain transmitted from the nerve endings made him groan with his perseverance. At this time, the mountains and blue seas around the Bian evaporated and disappeared like water encountering high temperature, and disappeared without a trace. Bang! A loud sound rang out, and the Bian flew backwards, seemingly being knocked away by the rhinoceros beetle, but in fact it was not. In fact, Luo Yan jumped up in advance, and cooperated with the rhinoceros beetle's actions, to make the mecha fly back. If it was not the case, it would not be as simple as exploding the Taishan shield, and deforming the left arm of the body. Judging from the power of the rhinoceros beetle's punch just now, at least the arm of Bian could not be saved. In the panoramic window, the scenery turned into distant light and shadow. After Luo Yan and the rhinoceros beetle pulled away, he saw that the aftermath of the punch was only now released. The surrounding space scene became blurred, the earth shook violently, and countless trees were ejected into the air, and then collapsed into ash. Then cracks appeared on the ground, and then some of the ground rose, and some sank, and finally all these things exploded together, and turned into dust. The rhinoceros beetle crashed out of the dust, and its breath had dropped. It was obvious that the explosion just now could not last. But the aura released was still terrifying, and the speed did not decrease at all. It turned into a golden lightning, and chased after Bian. Luo Yan quickly let the mecha land on both feet, and tried to stabilize the body with the help of friction with the ground, ready to resist the next attack. But the rhinoceros beetle was too fast. With the help of the prophet, Luo Yan concluded that the machine could not adjust its posture in time before the next attack. He gritted his teeth. At this point, he had no choice but to reveal his last trump card, the Phantom of the Soul. But at this moment, a huge black shadow suddenly appeared on the ground, and the shadow looked like a flying bird. The rhinoceros beetle lowered its head. This time it planned to use its unstoppable horn to smash the Bian to pieces. Suddenly, a black shadow quickly appeared on the ground. The rhinoceros beetle seemed to feel something, and was about to raise its head to observe, but at this moment, a palm fell on its head. The palm of the mecha. The hand pressed the rhinoceros beetle's head, and when the giant beast was sprinting at full speed, it actually pressed its head to the ground. Bang! The rhinoceros beetle's head landed on the ground, then bounced up, and flew high uncontrollably. Luo Yan couldn't help but look up. From the panoramic window, he could see the rhinoceros beetle flailing its arms and legs, and flapping its wings, but it couldn't stop, so it could only fly away helplessly. It flew far away, and landed in a forest, crushing a large number of trees. Captain. Yes, Captain. The voices of Ma Shuo and Meng Fangxi rang out in the communication channel, and Luo Yan saw that a mysterious machine appeared in front of his mecha. The golden wings were spread out, and each metal feather shone in the sun. The shape was majestic, with mysterious patterns emerging, and a gilded crescent blade was held in one hand. This was the mecha of the commander of the Changping Corps, the god general level Golden Rock. You did a good job, brother from Guangling. The external broadcast of Golden Rock sounded, you are quite good to be able to use a divine guard to hold back that top level upper level beast for so long. Leave it to me next. You and Marshuo and the others go to a safe place, and the third phase of the battle will begin soon. After saying that, the Golden Rock did not stop and spread its wings. The mecha turned into a golden stream of light and headed for the place where the rhinoceros beetle was. Luo Yan looked back. In the blink of an eye, the Golden Rock had already fought with the rhinoceros beetle. From time to time, there were flashes of swords shooting into the sky from that direction, and the rocks and trees were thrown into pieces. The battle was fierce. Let's go. Leave this to the regiment commander. Marshuo's voice sounded in the communication channel. Their 3 mechas had landed on the ground and released the Air Wing 3 aircraft. Luo Yang nodded and controlled the button to walk towards them. The 4 mechas ran across the land and headed for a safe place set up on the ground by the Changping Corps. At this time, the voice of Jiuying Wuoyang from the Corps command was heard in the communication channel. Kun has landed on the ground. Now we will enter the third phase of the battle. Please all mechas stay away. Next, it's up to the Xiangang Dragon Riders. As these words rang out, outside the panoramic window, Luo Yan saw the clouds in the distance change color. A huge and terrifying airflow roared over, blowing all the nearby trees down like rice fields. Even the mechas they were driving were slightly shaken by the violent airflow. After the airflow passed, the scene in the distance became clear, allowing Luo Yan to see a huge deep blue whale-like creature lying on the horizon. Chapter 404 Est. Woo. A whale-like cry sounded from the distant land. Bei looked out from the panoramic window and his sight fell on the giant fish on the horizon. That's Kun. The giant beast named Kun by humans is shaped like a blue whale and has a huge head. There is a row of golden eyes on both sides of the big head. The wing fins are undulating like waves, but it can no longer fly. The dorsal fin is gently raised, and it is like a mountain range. More than half of the anti-gravity organs and clusters on the body of this huge creature have been destroyed. Even if it can still create a zero gravity area, it cannot support its overly heavy body to float in the air as before, or even float in the sky. Just around Kun, a large number of anchor-head giant fleas scattered in all directions. Kun is like the towering tree they live in. Now that the tree has fallen, they have nowhere to hide. There is a feeling of monkeys scatter when the tree falls. In addition, the giant beast living on Kun also came down from the forbidden area in the air. Suddenly, the swarm of insects and the giant beast began to spread around. Yan Wenbo's voice rang out in the communication channel. How is it? Can you still fight? The ground defense battle just now was very intense, and everyone's condition and the performance of the machine have declined. But now is not the time to rest. If we don't eliminate as many parasites and behemoths as possible, even if Kun is dead, these things will cause serious damage to the surface ecology near Changping City and threaten the safety of the underground city. Therefore, the combat goal of the third phase, in addition to killing or changing the route of Kun, also includes killing as many parasites and behemoths as possible. Hearing Yan Wenbo's voice, the mecha divisions that can still fight in the public channel of Guangling Corps responded one after another. Bei also responded, and then whispered, I don't know how classmate Luo Yan is doing. Just then, a familiar voice rang out in the public channel. Captain, I can still fight. But we need to do some emergency treatment and replenish the energy of the mecha. Bei's eyes lit up when he heard it. This is Luo Yan's voice. Yan Wenbo breathed a sigh of relief in the communication channel and said, Zio Luo, I'm glad you're okay. Rest. You've already participated in the second phase of the battle. It's been hard enough. Let us do it next. There was silence in the communication channel for 2 or 3 seconds before Luo Yan said, okay. Bei immediately used the private communication mode to contact Luo Yan, and soon saw him on the holographic screen. Student Luo. Bei said happily, are you okay? On the screen, Luo Yan nodded slightly. Nothing. Bei asked hurriedly, where are you now? Are you exhausted? I'll ask Dan Liang to refine a KO Huandan for you. Luo Yan shook his head. That shouldn't be something that can be refined whenever you want, and you can't refine too much. Keep it for yourself. The captain told me not to participate in the battle. That pill will be more useful to you. Although Luo Yan refused, his starting point was to keep the pill for himself. Bei was still very happy, and the corners of his mouth suddenly rose uncontrollably. Hehe. Okay then. See you later. Then he concentrated and drove the 8 gates to join the Guanglin Corps. In the ground safety point, Luo Yan opened the cab and came out of the mecha. The Bion was undergoing emergency repairs. Since this was not a mecha repair point in the dungeon, and the resources were limited, it was impossible to completely restore the deformed left arm of the mecha. At best, it could only prevent it from affecting the battle. Originally, Luo Yan's idea was to do emergency treatment and then go to the battlefield, but now that Yan Wenbo asked him to rest, he did not force it. He felt that in his current state, even if he went to the battlefield, he could only fight parasites and lower level monsters at most. Against mid-level monsters, he might need the cooperation of teammates, and he might also need others to take care of him. Going would be a burden, so it would be better not to cause trouble. Zhao Luo, come here and let the doctor take a look at your hand. Ma Shuo's voice rang out. There were only 3 people left in their team, and they were being examined in a field medical vehicle. Ma Shuo first treated the wound on his body, with hemostatic patches and bandages on his forehead and arms, and waved to Luo Yan. Luo Yan looked at his left arm and nodded. When he got to the medical vehicle, he immediately smelled the smell of disinfectant, and then saw Meng Fangxi walking out of a room. The tall and thin young man glanced at Luo Yan, and then his eyes fell on his left arm. There is no one inside. Go let the doctor take a look at your hand. Treat it early. Don't leave the root of the disease. When Luo Yan passed by him, Meng Fangxi suddenly said, thank you for everything you have done. Luo Yan didn't say anything, went into the room, and saw the doctor. When Luo Yan took off his driving suit, the doctor saw that his left arm was purple and took a breath of cold air. Then he immediately checked Luo Yan. Fortunately, Luo Yan's arm bone only had a slight crack, and it would recover quickly without treatment. But the doctor still warned him to protect his arm in the near future, to avoid strong collisions, and not to lift heavy objects. Other injuries include severe muscle contusion, subcutaneous bleeding, etc. After treatment and care, he will recover soon. When Luo Yan walked out of the medical vehicle, his left hand was already in a cast. It looked like he didn't have to think about driving a mecha for the time being. Stay here. Ma Shuo was smoking a cigarette. Seeing Luo Yan coming out, he threw one to him. Then he smiled and said, we have to work. You can go to the tent over there to watch the live broadcast. The Dragon Riders are going to join the battle. I guess you don't want to miss it. Unfortunately, we can't watch it. We can only watch the video later. Throwing away the cigarette butt, Ma Shuo looked at Meng Fangxi and the others. Let's go to the front line. A moment later, their 3 machines left the ground safety point and rushed to the front line to participate in the battle. Luo Yan walked into the tent that Ma Shuo mentioned just now. There was a large screen in the tent, which was showing the image of Kun. There were many people in the tent. Those who had no work or tasks were all here. After all, no one wanted to miss the final battle of the 3rd stage, and it was not always possible to see the performance of the Xiangang Dragon Riders. I heard that there are only 2 Dragon Riders coming this time. Isn't that a little too few? 2 riders are not a small number. Besides, you, old Liu, haven't seen Dragon Riders very often in your life. It's good enough for you to see them. Don't say anything. Look, that's the mecha of the Dragon Riders, right? People looked at the big screen, including Luo Yan. On the big screen, 2 streams of light, one purple and one red, broke through the air and crossed the sky. Like 2 long rainbows, they were thrown towards the giant fish on the horizon. Chapter 405, Interception. Changping Corps Headquarters. On the bridge, Jiang Wuiyang shouted, tell me what is the current status of Kun? The monitors on the operating table below reported one after another. Kun currently has 63 biological organ clusters destroyed, and more than half of the anti-gravity biological organs have been destroyed. The activity of cells in Kun's body has increased significantly. The result of the computer's speculation is that the giant beast is regenerating its organs. It is expected that it will be able to recover its mobility in 3 hours. There is a biological reaction in Kun's body, but it is not a giant beast. The signal of the biological reaction is increasing, and the creature is about to appear. Various reports sounded one after another. Jiuying gripped the railing tightly. Only 3 hours. Gather the information to Xiangang Dragon Riders. I hope they can defeat this giant beast within the time limit. In addition, use all our ground surveillance cameras. I want to know what the creature in Kun's body is. Soon, hundreds of windows appeared on the big screen. After a period of computer screening, 3 of the windows were enlarged. From these 3 windows, it can be seen that Kun's body is squirming, and a moment later, a group of figures emerged from it. In the headquarters, the first thing people saw was a wrinkled face of an old woman. Then there was a robe woven from flesh, nerves, and mucus, floating in the air. Under the robe was an insect-like body, with a particularly round abdomen. But the upper part of the insect's body had 2 skinny arms with brown spots. The lower body had octopus-like tentacles that wriggled, supporting the creature to walk on the ground. When the creature completely left Kun, it was seen that it was still dragging a tail covered with insect eggs behind it, dragging on the ground, and eggs rolled out from time to time. What is this? A light cry came from the headquarters. That creature was the Anchor Flea Queen that Luo Yan had encountered in Kun's body. After the queen came outside the overlord beast, it opened its mouth and let out a roar that humans could not hear. However, the anchor fleas that had spread out and were already fighting with the ground mecha all stopped moving at the same time. Then they all turned their heads to look in the direction of the queen insect and responded. Although humans could not hear the sounds made by the queen insect and the giant fleas, Jiuying clearly saw the flea swarm responding through the ground monitoring in the command center. Those giant fleas have some connection with the creatures that just appeared. Could it be that the queen insect? Jiuying had just raised this question when he saw the anchor-headed giant fleas in the channel flying into the air in groups, abandoning the ground battlefield. Tens of thousands of giant fleas gathered together, like a dark cloud, densely floating in a certain direction. In that direction, 2 rainbow lights, one red and one purple, soon appeared. Xiangang Dragon Riders. Hiss. Jiuying took a breath of cold air. That thing is commanding the flea swarm. They want to intercept the Xiangang Dragon Riders. This scene also appeared on the big screen in the tent far away on the ground. Everyone in the tent exclaimed. These bugs are so powerful that they know how to intercept the Dragon Riders? Don't worry, the Xiangang Dragon Riders are not something these bugs can mess with. Although people are full of confidence in the Xiangang Dragon Riders, it is somewhat surprising to see that the bugs can actually intercept the Dragon Riders. Luo Yan narrowed his eyes slightly, always feeling that the gathering of the flea swarm this time was not so simple. They did not see the image of the Anchor Flea Queen, so they did not know that the flea swarm was under the command of the queen. The next second, the flea swarms gathered in the sky, one by one, suddenly rose up illusory flames. In those flames, the anchor fleas, regardless of male or female, all expanded a circle, especially the male fleas. Their bodies swelled up, and it seemed that they would explode at any time. At this time, countless female fleas have begun to emit bioenergy rays. The rays emitted at this moment are dark red in color, and the speed is fast and the frequency is high. The female fleas fired like high-speed machine guns, and the rays in the sky were intertwined, which made people dazzled. Under the cover of the female fleas, the male fleas traveled through the dense rays, miraculously not hitting or being hit by the female fleas, and rushed towards the Xiangang Dragon Riders in groups. The mechs driven by the 2 Dragon Riders did not stop or deter. They directly crashed into the rays, and countless fireballs exploded around the mechs. Although there were many fireballs, they could not stop the Dragon Riders for a moment. The male fleas that followed were even more suicidal. As soon as they hit the mechs, their bodies suddenly swelled, and flames lit up inside their bodies, and they exploded with a bang. Self-explosion. The male flea self-exploded. Under the stimulation of some kind of power, they instantly stimulated their life energy and exploded tragically, using this method to block the Dragon Riders. It was nothing if 1 or 2 male fleas self-exploded, but the scene was quite spectacular when groups of male fleas self-exploded. Outside the tent, the muffled sound of explosions came from afar. Luo Yan simply came outside the tent and saw that it seemed as if a string of firecrackers were lit in the sky in the distance, and male fleas continued to explode. Countless male fleas exploded with amazing power. The aftermath of the explosions that spread to the safe point alone set off a strong wind. It is not difficult to imagine that the scene of the explosion was hundreds and thousands of times more terrible. In fact, there was a constant strong wind in the sky, and even the sun in the sky was eclipsed by the flames of the explosion. Luo Yan's breath sank when he saw it, and he asked himself, if he was in that situation, he would probably only be able to temporarily avoid the sharp edge, or try to bypass the flea swarm and attack again. However, in the distant sky, amid a series of explosions and dense rays, the two rainbow lights, one red and one purple, did not stop for a moment. They drew gorgeous light marks in the sky, and passed through countless rays and fireballs firmly. The two color rainbow lights whizzed past, bringing a roar like thunder, and crashed into the female fleas. When the two rainbow lights broke through the insect swarm, thousands of anchor fleas withered. Whether it was the male fleas that self-destructed, or the female fleas that served as artillery, at this moment, their bodies or fragments fell from the sky like raindrops and snowflakes. Soon the ground on that side was covered with insect corpses and fragments. At this time, the Kun on the distant horizon roared like a blue whale, and then something slowly emerged from its big head. Even though the distance was extremely far, Luo Yan, who was in a safe spot, could still see strands of black and blue hair floating on Kun's big head. They seemed to be blown by the wind in the air, and they rose and fell like seaweed in the water. Luo Yan's pupils expanded little by little, and in his red eyes, he reflected the figure of Kun in the distance, as well as the figure of a woman that slowly emerged from Kun. The Overlord Beast, the Beast Soul appears. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 406, Dragon Riders, Attack. The Beast Soul has appeared. Kun has revealed his Beast Soul. People in the Changping Corps headquarters cheered softly. Even Jiuying Wuang, who had been mentally prepared early in the morning, couldn't help but feel nervous at this moment. Once the Beast Soul of the Overlord Beast appears, it will use special skills. How earth-shattering will the special skills used by the Overlord Beast of Kun be? Can the Tushiangang Dragon Riders win the battle? Although he has confidence in the Xiangang Dragon Riders, at this moment, Jiuying Wuang's heartbeat accelerated when he saw Kun reveal his Beast Soul. Even the Chief of Staff was like this. The other mecha divisions were even more shocked. In the cab of the embroidered tiger, Yan Wenbo, who was originally pale, looked at the shadow of a woman gradually emerging on the big head of the giant fish, and his face became even paler. The shadow of the woman was beautiful, with a huge face but no pores, giving people the feeling of delicate and smooth skin. The woman's long hair fluttered, her eyes were closed, and her long eyelashes trembled from time to time, as if she was immersed in a beautiful dream, but she might wake up at any time. The shadow crossed her hands in front of her chest, covering her proud peaks. Although she was not wearing any clothes, she was covered with dark blue fish scales from the neck down. The dark blue scales sparkled dazzlingly in the sun, making the scales look like a gorgeous armor inlaid with gems. At this time, the shadow of the woman slowly opened her eyes. Her pupils were brilliant gold. When Yan Wenbo met her eyes, he trembled all over, as if he was facing something he shouldn't see. The huge difference in the life levels between the two made Yan Wenbo's face pale and blue, and even the hand holding the controller trembled. At this time, Jiuying Wuang's voice sounded in the communication channel. Don't look directly at the Beast Soul, unless you are above the Tangsuan realm. Otherwise, once people below this realm look directly at the Beast Soul, they will be mentally shocked. Suddenly, countless mecha masters avoided the Beast Soul, not daring to watch, let alone look at it. The female phantom looked up at the Tushiangang Dragon Riders at this time, and a powerful momentum surged to the sky, causing the Beast Soul's long hair to fly up. The hair seemed to turn into a wriggling venomous snake, and it was like the tentacles of an octopus. It spread out and danced in the air. As the beast soul made a singing sound, the atmosphere suddenly vibrated, and the moisture in the air was extracted and condensed, turning into hundreds of flying water belts. Those water belts were like dragons, crossing the sky with their fangs and claws, and pounced on the two mechs. Strange skills. Kun's beast soul used strange skills. Each of those water belts was as magnificent as a river. They rushed and rushed, like a river across the sky, with amazing momentum. On the ground, the tentacles under the body of the anchor flea queen worm squirmed, and suddenly a water belt passed under its feet. The queen worm stepped on the water belt, and followed the dragon rider in the air. There were two dragon rider mechs, and the one driven by Pan Crossing had a dark purple outer armor. At this time, lines appeared on the body. Those lines seemed to combine into a mysterious symbol. Immediately, illusory flags rose behind the mecha. There were 3 large flags, which rose behind the mecha. These 3 large flags looked very broken, and the surface was even more mottled, as if they were stained with countless blood, and experienced endless battles. But after these 3 large flags were raised, Pan Crossing's mecha burst out with a deep murderous aura, like a demon god walking out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. The mecha raised its hand, and a large flag on the left suddenly turned into a chaotic stream of mottled colors, gathered in the palm of the mecha, and turned into a dark light, heavy meaning, and a spear with murderous aura flying. Holding the spear, Pan Crossing's mecha suddenly made a throwing motion, and the arm of the mecha suddenly turned into a piece of light and shadow. The spear disappeared from his hand, and it had already been nailed into the chest of the anchor flea queen. Suddenly, the old woman's face on the queen's head suddenly became ferocious, and she let out a shrill scream. Hiss. The old driver's face suddenly tore open, and the 2 sides of the human face opened, revealing a mouthful of nest teeth underneath. The spear nailed to it suddenly burst out, and a chaotic light spread from the spear body. It was like water, and like fire. It spread and spread on the anchor flea queen, and after passing through, the queen's trembling body withered, shattered, and rotted. The queen let out a shrill roar, and in the rotten flesh, it desperately gave birth to pink flesh whiskers, as if it wanted to regenerate its flesh. But it was of no avail. The speed of regeneration could not keep up with the progress of collapse. In just a moment, the queen had half of its body collapsed. The blood-colored robe floating on the body turned into pieces of red powder, and dissipated in the air. The body of the insect below, the round abdomen, the thin and long hands, or the long tail full of insect eggs, suddenly exploded, exploding countless flesh and blood, dissipating in the air. In a flash, the anchor flea queen was blown to pieces, and even the water belt below it was infected by the turbid light, so that the water belt quickly disappeared, and then disappeared into the air. So strong. Is this the Dragon Rider? Too strong. People cheered in the Long Army Command Center. The queen, who looked very difficult to mess with, was killed by Pan Crossing in one blow, before she even had time to attack. This scene was undoubtedly very gratifying, and greatly boosted the morale of the entire army. Although Jiuying had a smile on his face, he did not cheer like the others. Firstly, it was due to his personality, and secondly, he knew that, although Pan Crossing killed the queen in one blow, that blow was definitely not an ordinary combat skill. Instead, it was an attack that had increased its power and changed its form. After activating the Xuanwen, the surface was safer. Luoyan used his still movable hand to block the strong wind blowing from a distance. He looked at the direction where the anchor flea queen disappeared. His face was calm, but his heart was in turmoil. Luoyan stared at the purple mecha, and his eyes were more focused on the mysterious patterns on the body of the mecha. The wonderful patterns that looked like the Tesu pattern were obviously the Xuanwen on the body of the god general level mecha. At that time in the Misty Canyon, he had seen with his own eyes that after Xing activated the Xuanwen, his combat power increased greatly. And under the influence of the Xuanwen, the form of the combat skills changed, and the power was a huge difference from usual. Now, he saw the god general's attack again. The anchor flea queen that had chased him before was killed in one blow, which made Luoyan more yearning. After Pan Crossing killed the queen insect in seconds, the mecha driven by Pan Yu, which looked like a red butterfly, suddenly increased its speed, leaving a scarlet-like trail, and nimbly passed through the attacks of many water hoses. Then it flew over the head of Kun's female beast soul. When Panyu's scarlet mecha flew over, the butterfly-like wings flapped and scattered bits of firefly powder. The firefly powder, which was glittering with colorful light, continued to rise with scarlet flames as soon as it fell on the beast soul. When those flames were connected, they vaguely condensed into the outline of a red butterfly. Chapter 407, Cover. The red butterfly formed by the red fire flow suddenly flew onto Kun's beast soul and covered the body of the fishman woman's virtual image. It immediately turned into a sky-high flame that swept the beast soul's body and even washed to other places in the airbase. The red flame brought terrible destruction. On the forbidden ground in the air, the biological matrix was burned by the fire and immediately turned into a dark red rough ground. Kun moved slightly, and the carbonized matrix cracked into cracks, and black smoke and flickering sparks floated from it. The virtual image of the woman enveloped by the flames made a singing sound in the red flames, which made the water belts in the air like tentacles pulling at Pan crossing. Half of them retracted and entangled in the flames, causing the color of the flames to dim rapidly and eventually extinguish. After the other water belts failed to attack Pan crossing, they gathered together and condensed into the shape of a whale. This giant fish was very similar to Kun itself. Although it was made of water, it also had undulating fins and a dorsal fin, as long as a mountain. It swam in the atmosphere like a real fish, and pounced towards Pan Crossing's purple mecha. The two remaining large flags behind Pan Crossing's mecha were emitting turbid light, which dissipated like light smoke at the edges of the flags. Facing the large fish that was rushing towards it, the mecha clenched its fist and blasted it fiercely. This punch hit the big fish's head, and suddenly, the big fish's body expanded and exploded. The water mass in the air spun rapidly, forming a vortex. The vortex generated an invisible suction force, pulling Pan Crossing's mecha in. The sound of water roared, simulating the power of the vortex in the sea, and it seemed to crush the mecha with the force of the vortex's rotation. On the other side, after extinguishing the flames on her body, the virtual image of the woman on Kun's back looked at Panyu's vermilion mecha in the air. As the golden eyes in the virtual image of the woman reflected Panyu's mecha, the streams of water that had previously surrounded the virtual image suddenly broke through the air like white silk. Those water belts were stretched straight, like murderous silver-white long swords, and dozens of white silks rushed forward and stabbed at Panyu's mecha. But Panyu's mecha was very flexible, and mysterious patterns lit up on the body. After turning on the mysterious patterns, it flew lightly like a butterfly. The white silks were still coming fiercely, but they could not hit it. In the Changping Corps command, everyone was secretly sweating when they saw Kun fighting 1 against 2, and seemed to be not at a disadvantage. Jiuying was calm and composed. He knew that the Xiangang Dragon Riders would not be at this level. Sure enough, soon on the screen, in the huge vortex in the air, the patterns on Pan Crossing's purple mecha lit up, and at this moment, a dazzling fire burst out. I don't know what secret method Pan Crossing used, the fire on the mecha was dazzling and bursting wildly. Although it was an illusory flame, it burned the surrounding water like a real high-temperature flame, causing the huge vortex to boil continuously. In a blink of an eye, the entire screen was filled with water vapor, and it was no longer possible to see what was happening on the scene. But soon, a purple light flashed like lightning, broke through the encirclement of the sky full of water vapor, and headed towards Kun. When Pan Crossing's mecha broke through the air, the atmosphere was distorted, forming circles of ripples. The big flag on the other side behind the mecha suddenly spread out, turning into a turbid light, exuding a terrifying and murderous intention, and vaguely turned into the phantom of a ferocious beast. In an instant, the ferocious beast wrapped in the mecha, with mottled and turbid light and a little fire, rushed towards Kun as the mecha crashed into it, suddenly raised its head to the sky and let out a silent roar, exuding an amazing heat and a momentum to burn the world. As it descended in altitude, everything on the ground spontaneously combusted without fire. The female beast Solon Kun let out a loud cry, and the space around them suddenly blurred. A gravitational force field formed the shape of a palm and slapped Pan Crossing, as if to knock down Pan Crossing's mecha like slapping a fly. Pan Crossing did not dodge, and the mecha crashed into it. The beast that enveloped the body rushed out first, and crashed into the palm formed by the gravitational force field. At the moment of contact, Pan Crossing's beast suddenly became flat, as if it was crushed by invisible gravity, and was about to collapse in an instant. But the palm also suddenly burst into strange fire, and the force field in it was violently impacted. One finger instantly cracked, followed by the second and third. The palm formed by the gravitational force field exploded in an instant, and finally cancelled out the beast, declaring that they would perish together, and both disappeared in mid-air. Pan Crossing had no more obstacles, and rushed towards Kun, and pounced on the fishman beast soul. The beast soul is the manifestation of the essence of the giant beast. Attacking the beast soul, or even destroying it, will hurt it far more than attacking the body of the giant beast. This is common sense in fighting against the overlord beast. As a Jiuying dragon rider who often has to face the overlord beast, Pan Crossing naturally knows the importance of it. During the sprint, the last big flag on the back of the mecha turned into mottled turbid light, soaring into the sky, and scattered around, forming a bunch of short spears. There were dozens of these short spears, which were arranged in a pattern like a formation behind the mecha, inspiring fierce murderous aura and murderous intent. The mecha casually grasped one of them, and pointed it at the fishman beast soul. The dozens of short spears behind him suddenly turned into turbid beams of light, and were thrown at the fishman beast soul with great momentum. Kun obviously didn't want to sit and wait for death. The fishman beast soul's long hair was scattered, and a tail of illusory fish was shaken out. There were so many fish swimming around that they were like a school of fish, facing the mottled beams of light that were coming at them. As the two collided violently, the sky suddenly changed, and there was a constant roar. In the fierce collision, fish would occasionally jump to the ground. These seemingly unreal fish, when they landed on the ground, the things they collided with suddenly became flat, and the ground even pressed out a concave pattern in the shape of a fish body. The mottled beams of light transformed by the short spears were sometimes knocked off by the school of fish, and when they crossed the ground, a large area of trees withered instantly, and turned into ashes. The ground was even more mottled and turbid. In this mottled area, the evil spirit was soaring into the sky, and all things did not grow, and the death was strong. In the constant collision between the school of fish and the mottled beams, Pan Yu, who was ignored, had already thrown off the white silk, and turned around to rush over. Bright and mysterious patterns lit up on the mecha, and suddenly a ball of red flames broke out from the body of the mecha. After the flames spread out, they turned into tens of thousands of red butterflies. Butterflies flapped their wings, and fell from the sky, flying around the fishman phantom. Then, as if they were tired of flying, the butterflies landed on the fishman phantom one by one, and attached themselves to it. The next second, all the butterflies burst into flames, and wisps of thin flames rose from their bodies, gathering into a ball of blazing storm in an instant, drowning Kun's beast soul, and sweeping across a large area of the forbidden land in the sky. Suddenly, everyone on the battlefield could clearly hear Kun let out a long wail. This was the first time it had let out a wail since the war began, which showed that the storm had caused it great harm. Only then did people understand the tactics of the dragon riders. It turned out that the seemingly ferocious Pan Crossing was actually a cover, and the person responsible for killing the giant beast was actually Pan Yu. Chapter 408 Brothers and Sisters. The giant beast lying on the horizon let out a shrill wail, and the sound was heard from far away, forming a strong wind that blew across the earth. Luo Yan's hair was blown back, and the strong wind made him squint slightly. I saw that the beast soul in the distance, which was enveloped by the blazing storm, did something unknown. Suddenly, streams of water rose up like silver snakes, extinguishing or taking away the red flames that seemed to be extremely sticky. When many streams of water washed the flames to form a water column rising into the sky, there was finally no trace of fire on the fishman beast soul. The water column was like the water spray of a whale. After reaching the sky, it spread out and turned into continuous raindrops falling from the sky. Even Luo Yan, who was far away at a safe point, could feel the water drops falling from the sky. Looking at the beast soul again, the virtual image of the woman presented by Kun was obviously traumatized. There were many traces of burning and curling on her long hair, and the scales on her body were no longer as bright as before. Although it was a phantom, the beautiful woman's face was now covered with horrible and ugly scars. The beast soul was injured, and Kun's body showed the marks of injury directly. Large pieces of flesh glowed red, emitted green smoke, and turned into charcoal. Those charcoal-like flesh fell off as soon as they moved, revealing the flesh and blood inside. In an instant, Kun's body was covered with large areas of burn marks, and blood flowed like a stream. The blood that flowed out even formed small rivers on the ground, filling up the large and small cracks on the ground. The advantage is not to be spared. The mecha driven by Pan Crossing suddenly burst out with momentum and used some secret method again, making the mysterious patterns on the mecha light up with hot and dazzling light. In the dazzling brilliance that was difficult to see, a large flag was raised behind the mecha, but this flag was obviously different from the previous one. It was larger than any previous flag, and the illusory, mottled, and blood-stained flag surface was like waves. The edge of the flag exuded a turbid breath, like the smoke on the battlefield, rising silently. There was also a red-eyed black bear on the flag. The black bear had complex and obscure patterns on its body, and those patterns were changing slightly every second. The mech stretched out his hand, and the big flag floated into its hand. Holding the flagpole, the mech waved the big flag. Immediately, a large number of animal phantoms emerged from the blood-stained battle flag. Various beasts, with the breath of death and killing all over their bodies, exuding evil spirits and malice, rushed out of the battle flag one after another. They seemed to be the beast souls imprisoned in the battle flag. At this moment, they were freed, and immediately these beasts rushed towards Kun like a tide. Thousands of phantoms vaguely formed the outline of the red-eyed black bear on the battle flag as they ran. The fishman beast soul on Kun's body suddenly looked at Pan Crossing's mech, at the black bear formed by countless phantoms, and opened his mouth to make a clear sound. At that moment, the blood river flowing on the ground under Kun's body was boiling, and the river water was shaking and rising. In an instant, the blood waves on the ground were surging. In the safe point, Luo Yan almost stopped breathing, only to see that Kun actually used his blood to turn them into tentacles of different sizes, long and short, with obvious barbs. These tentacles whipped the black bear, and a large number of beast phantoms disappeared instantly. Or they slid over the black bear, and the barbs licked off a large piece of the black bear's flesh. The most terrifying thing was some tentacles that suddenly expanded and exploded. They caused the greatest damage to the black bear, and often the black bear's body seemed to dissipate. Obstructed by these tentacles, the countless beast souls released by Pan Crossing were greatly reduced. By the time they rushed through the tentacles, only 10 of them were left. The remaining beast shadows could not maintain the shape of black bears, but they still pounced on Kun's fishman beast soul, and gnawed it frantically. So the big fish, which was already covered with wounds, was now torn apart and bleeding. At the same time, a piece of water vapor appeared in the sky at some point. The water vapor was so large that it almost covered the entire sky. Luo Yan only realized at this time that the rain had stopped. Suddenly, he had an idea and looked up at the water vapor in the sky. The water vapor dissipated rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye, and from the dispersed water vapor, a huge sea of fire was sinking. The sea of fire was huge, with waves of fire surging in the sea, scorching and fierce. In the sea of fire, Luo Yan saw the scarlet body driven by Pan Yu. It turned out that when Kun and Pan Crossing were entangled just now, Pan Yu had quietly laid a sea of fire in the sky. The water vapor in the sky was formed by the flames burning the moisture in the sky. No wonder the heavy rain created by Kun stopped halfway through. At this time, the sea of fire suppressed down, and when the woman's phantom was bitten by the beast, it pressed down completely, wanting to kill the beast soul and Kun's body together. Immediately, some of the tentacles formed by blood on the ground rolled towards Kun's beast soul, pulling off the phantoms of the beasts that were biting on the beast soul and strangling them. More blood tentacles faced the sea of fire falling from above, just like pillars supporting the sky, supporting the sea of fire. Pan Crossing was not idle. When the fire rain fell from the sky, he controlled the mecha to bypass the blood tentacles that were like pillars, and pounced on the beast soul with a clear goal. Before the battle, he and Pan Yu had made a plan. The two attacked the giant beast at the same time. When the giant beast focused on any one person, that person would be responsible for restraining, and the other would be responsible for the main attack. Therefore, the cover used to distract the giant beast's attention does not necessarily have to be played by Pan Crossing, but is flexible and maneuverable. Just like now, Kun ignored Pan Crossing. In order to support the sea of fire, Pan Crossing seized the opportunity to attack. The black pattern on the mecha flashed, and 5 more battle flags rose behind it. The 5 battle flags were similar in shape to the previous ones, except that the flags were no longer black bears, but tigers. Under Pan Crossing's control, the mecha stretched out its hand and a tiger flag fell into the mecha's hand. The flag was rolled up, and it turned into a tiger-headed spear in the flashing light. The remaining 4 tiger flags were the same, all of which were rotated and wrapped to turn into spears, suspended around the mecha. When the mecha crashed into Kun's beast soul, the tiger-headed spear stabbed out and turned into a mottled stream of light with turbid colors. The large spears suspended around them flashed and attacked at the same time, like a machine gun shooting, and the mottled streams of light in the sky were like a meteor shower, whistling down. In the streams of light, there were more spear tassels blooming, falling on the woman's phantom, and ripples appeared in circles. The spear struck Kun's beast soul again and again, and immediately stabbed the shadow of the woman with transparent holes. Kun wailed again, and his flesh and blood continued to burst. Under the pain and injury, the blood tentacles, that were originally straight suddenly shook, and then several tentacles could no longer withstand the pressure, and caught fire and rolled back. Above the sky, in the sea of fire, the mysterious patterns on the scarlet mecha burst into brilliance, and the sea of fire pressed down, bending and bursting the blood tentacles one by one. Boom. The sea of fire finally fell on Kun. Chapter 409, Signal Offline. The sea of fire descended. Pan Crossing did not seem to retreat. The patterns on the mecha were bright, and the battle flag rose again behind him. From the mottled battle flag without patterns at the beginning, to the black bear flag with many animal shadows just now, to the tiger flag that turned into a tiger-headed spear. And now, on the raised battle flag, on the blood-stained flag, there was a dragon with bared fangs and claws. The dragon flag. When this flag was offered, it immediately exuded endless malicious flames, full of death and murderous intent. Under Pan Crossing's control, the mecha carried the tiger-headed spear and sent it forward. The spear in his hand flew out and merged with the other spears into the tiger phantom, hitting Kun's beast soul and boiling and exploding, making the woman's phantom increasingly faint, as if it would disappear at any time. At the same time, the mecha stretched out its hand and waved the dragon battle flag. The flag surface was entangled, the flag body twisted, and it turned into a black dragon shaking its head and tail. The evil dragon circled and flew in the sky, splashing pieces of ink like breath, and even danced a black cloud that looked like splashed ink. The wind comes from the tiger, and the cloud comes from the dragon. At that moment, the evil dragon in the sky brought the ink-like cloud and swooped down, and a terrifying breath immediately spread. The evil dragon with a strong murderous aura and the boiling ink-colored cloud slammed into Kun's beast soul. The overlord beast screamed 3 times, and the shadow of the woman on the big head was surrounded by ink-colored clouds. Wherever the clouds touched, Kun's beast soul quickly faded and disappeared, with the implication of death. The evil dragon was even more entangled and tightly wrapped around the fishman's beast soul. The dragon head raised, opened its mouth, and sprayed ink-colored fierce flames at the woman's face, which already had many ugly scars. Controlling the black dragon cloud formed by the dragon flag to attack and suppress the beast soul, Pan Crossing looked up and saw that the sea of fire was already in front of him. He made a quick decision and fled far away. But just as the mecha started to move, blood tentacles on the ground twisted and swirled, weaving into a huge, long demon arm. The arm spread its palm and slapped Pan Crossing's mecha. The purple mecha immediately lost control and flew out, spinning continuously, crossing the earth, and flying far away. In the safe point, Luo Yan's pupils dilated slightly and saw that Pan Crossing's mecha was approaching from afar, and it seemed that it had a tendency to smash into this place. In the cab, various alarms sounded. Pan Crossing's eyes and nose bled, and his head was dizzy, but he still found that the mecha was about to fall into the safety point on the ground, and barely controlled the mecha to deflect to the left. At that moment, the people in the safe point heard a terrifying howl from the sky, and then many tents were blown up by the strong wind. People fell to the ground with their heads in their arms. Suddenly, it went dark above their heads. Then they saw Pan Crossing's mecha turn to the left, barely passing the safe point, and then fell to the ground. The mecha kept rolling on the ground, bouncing up from time to time, until it finally stopped, after rolling 2 kilometers. At this time, Luo Yan heard a cry from the Changping Core command in his headphones. Then someone said, "The signal of pilot pan crossing is offline, and the pilot has lost consciousness. The pilot has lost consciousness." But at this moment, the ground shook. Luo Yan got up from the ground and looked up. It was a sea of fire in the sky that pressed heavily on Kun. After being hit one after another, the shadow of the woman on the head of the overlord beast finally disappeared in the flames. There was a sudden light in the distance. Then the strong light was dazzling, and first there was a huge roar, but then Luo Yan could not hear anything. The sound was so loud. He quickly closed his eyes and stuck to the ground, and then a terrifying airflow blew over. The scorching air waves washed over the earth, and all the tents in the safe spot flew into the air, and then burned themselves in the wind. The people on the ground were blown up by the wind, and their clothes caught fire, but they were quickly blown out by the wind. Luo Yan felt a burning sensation on his head. It turned out that a few hairs were burning, but they were quickly extinguished. Then his body was lifted up by the wind again. Luo Yan did not resist, but just practiced his skills. A few dragon scales appeared behind him, and then he curled up and hugged his head and was blown dozens of meters away like a balloon. After the strong wind passed, he fell to the ground without injury. At this time, people nearby kept screaming and falling from the sky, and with them fell all kinds of light debris. For a while, there was a constant crackling sound in the ground safe spot. Luo Yan looked at the horizon again, where a vermilion fireball was rising, and gradually turned into a huge butterfly shape. He was about to open the Wuwang burning eye to observe Kun's condition, and suddenly saw a huge black shadow crashing out of the flames in the distance. Kun. It's not dead yet, but now, it looks miserable. Its body was severely damaged, and its entire body was charred. Many parts of its flesh and blood were burned, exposing the charred bones. Especially its head. Half of its flesh and blood melted, revealing its skull and gums. One of its wing fins disappeared, and its dorsal fin was in tatters. The seriously injured fish was emitting green smoke, but it still flew out of the flames. It seemed that, because most of its flesh and blood were burned, it was able to float close to the ground, because of the reduced weight. Kun could no longer make any sound, but the remaining golden eyeball on its head reflected the figure of Pan Crossing's mecha. The big fish swam in the air and flew over, and it seemed that it wanted to drag Pan Crossing down with it. At this time, behind the big fish, the mecha driven by Pan Yu rushed over and kept bombarding the big fish with fireballs. It can be seen that Pan Yu's strength is now very little, and he can no longer use the powerful moves before. He can only attack with fireballs, hoping to stop the big fish. But now Kun seemed determined to kill Pan Crossing. He let Pan Yu attack him, and the big fish with only half of its body left refused to stop. "Hurry, wake up, pilot Pan Crossing." Jiuying's voice sounded in Luo Yan's headphones. Then he heard the chief of staff ask other mechs that could be spared to rush to stop the giant beast, or take Pan Crossing's mecha away. Luo Yan thought about it, jumped up, and rushed to a nearby off-road vehicle. The driver looked up with his head on the steering wheel of the off-road vehicle. Luo Yan jumped on it, reached out and threw the driver out of the car. Then he started the off-road vehicle, turned the steering wheel, and rushed out of the safe point. Now, the closest to Pan Crossing is this surface safe point. Originally, the best option was for Luo Yan to drive the mecha to transfer Pan Crossing. But the B is still under maintenance, and cannot be used. In this way, if you want to transfer Pan Crossing, there is only one last way. Because the distance was short, Luo Yan quickly arrived at the landing point of the mecha, where the ground was pushed up by the mecha body. The purple mecha was leaning against the hillside. Luo Yan drove up the hillside and came near the mecha. Then he ran to the mecha cab and used the manual device to open the door of the cab. He rushed in and saw Pan Crossing's head leaning back and losing consciousness. Luo Yan quickly took him down from the seat, then sat in the driver's seat himself, with both hands on the controller. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes. Concentrate on feeling the existence of the mecha, and use your advantage as a natural resonator to achieve wireless empathy with the mecha. Chapter 410, 10 Directions of Nirvana. At first, Luo Yan felt nothing, but soon, He seemed to hear a strong heartbeat. And a sneer. With a hint of disdain, madness, and arrogance. Then, mottled light and shadow appeared in front of his eyes. Artillery fire and gunpowder smoke spread all over the devastated land. Horsehooves thundered, war flags rolled, and iron armor was stained with blood and long tassels. Looking around, it was all blood. In that red scene, there were warriors with upright backs, holding animal heads, and roaring to the sky, and there were also dead bodies lying on the ground with bloody faces that were difficult to distinguish. The splashing snow mud fell into the turbid blood, and the empty eyes and numb body moved forward like a zombie. In the sea of corpses and blood, 2 hands reached to the ground and picked up a helmet that fell on the ground. He stretched out his bloody palm and wiped it on the helmet. The smooth helmet reflected a face with a raised corner of the mouth and an unruly face. Put on the helmet. Carry the banner. He kicked the corpse away and walked forward with a big laugh. The scene flashed. In Luo Yan's ears, he suddenly heard the boiling sound of killing, the sound of metal and iron ringing endlessly. Looking out again, there was a sure battlefield below. Smoke billowed, and battle flags were densely covered. On the battlefield, the fighting was in full swing. The setting sun was setting, and the sky was full of huge and ferocious figures. On the ground, cannons and fire arrows were shining against each other. On one side were countless beasts with different appearances. On the other side were people wearing helmets and armor, holding shields and swords. The heavy cannons of ancient shape had long barrels and thick walls. Every time they roared, they would spit out fierce flames crazily, accelerating the shells of unknown material into the air, pulling out a parabola, and falling into the distant beasts or the giant shadows in the sky. Then, orange-red fireballs bloomed, and black smoke rose. The red and black made the colors on the battlefield even more intense. The sound of the explosion was deafening, and countless arrows and streams of light shot up into the sky, then fell all over the sky, splashing blood among the beasts and some friendly forces. In this smoke-filled killing field, Luo Yan saw himself raising his hands high, and a large amount of black aura surged around him, turning into a series of phantoms of people or beasts, rising into the sky, condensing together, and forming a ball. When his hands were clenched and pulled, the black sphere in the sky deformed and stretched, turning into a spear. The spear was 100 feet long, and the spear body kept squirming. The view was closer, and it turned out that this spear was formed by the phantoms of countless beasts or humans condensing together. Those beast shadows and human figures seemed to struggle to get away from the spear, but were restricted by some kind of force. So from a distance, it looked like thousands of insects were swarming on the spear, which made people's scalps numb. This spear exuded endless death and evil spirit, as if it came from the depths of the underworld, the depths of purgatory, and not from the human world. Then Luo Yan saw himself throwing a spear with both hands. The next moment, the spear that was 100 feet long in the sky, fell from the sky, and pierced into the center of the battlefield. A cross-shaped black flame immediately erupted. The black flame spread and extended, and then exploded, turning into a black storm that swept across the battlefield. In the storm, the shadows of beasts and human figures flew by with a roar, crashing into a large number of beasts and a small number of humans. Then, both beasts and humans froze in their movements, and then pieces of flesh and blood peeled off their bodies and fell to the ground, breaking into ash. In an instant, the battlefield suddenly became quiet, and countless corpses suddenly appeared on the ground of thousands of feet. They were all the remains of creatures that had been eroded by the black flames and death energy just now, and their flesh and blood turned into ash in an instant. After one shot, both the enemy and us were destroyed. 10 Direction Silent Spear. For some reason, Luo Yan actually knew the name of that spear, and knew how to practice and use it. But he also knew that he could never replicate this terrifying trick that could kill both enemies and us. Because the 10 Direction Silent Spear requires the use of silence fire and a large amount of death energy. Silent fire needs to be nurtured with the power of Yang Gang. As a second choice, Xuan Qi can also nurture silent fire, but its quality and power are far inferior to Yang Gang. But it is difficult to nurture Death Qi. It requires the use of certain instruments or skills to gather and store Death Qi and release it when needed. 10 Direction Silent Spear is a trick that uses Death Qi as fuel and ignites it with silent fire so that it can be performed. Even if Luo Yan can cultivate to the Tangxuan realm, he can only nurture silent fire at most, but he can't get death key. These thoughts flashed in his mind and disappeared. The light and shadow in his eyes disappeared, and he saw the scene in the cab again. At this time, the empathy system was restored, which meant that Luo Yan had already empathized with this god general level mecha. Outside the panoramic window, Kun, who was only half of his body, had already pounced, and Luo Yan had to control the mecha to move away. Suddenly, he heard a chuckle. That chuckle was exactly the same as the sound he heard when he empathized with the mecha. How could this happen? At this moment, above the earth, in the eyes of Pan Crossing's purple mecha, the original blue light flashed twice and disappeared. Then a bright red light appeared. In the cab, a red light shone. Luo Yan suddenly felt a weak suction force, as if pulling his body. He felt a chill on his back and wanted to let go of the seat immediately, but found that his hands could not leave the controller. Just between his fingers, wisps of black breath spread out. His body shook violently, and it turned out that the mecha stood up. At the same time, in the Changping Core command, Jiang Wuoyang breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the mecha stand up on the big screen. Just now, everyone in the command saw that Luo Yan drove to the vicinity and entered the cab. Jiang Wuoyang knew a little about Luo Yan. He knew that Luo Yan was a natural resonator and guessed that the young mecha master of the Guanglin Core should have replaced Pan Crossing and controlled the god level body. Now the mecha stood up, naturally to avoid the overlord beast. But at this time, look, what's going on with that mecha? On the big screen, the mecha raised its hands and lowered its head, as if it was observing its own hands. It was just like a person who had just woken up and was regaining the feeling of his body. This scene made Jiang Wuoyang's scalp numb, and he thought of a possibility. At this moment, on the big screen, Kun opened his head with only half of his flesh and blood and roared silently at the mecha. The gravity field on the earth suddenly changed, and the gravity near the mecha suddenly increased, causing the body to kneel on the ground. It was as if an invisible mountain was pressing on the mecha, and soon the ground under the mecha quickly collapsed. At this time, the mecha suddenly raised its head, and a red light flashed in its eyes. Then the body propped up, as if it was going to charge against the gravity. The next second, the body rushed out violently, and the surrounding space was distorted, and the light and shadow flickered, as if the gravity field was torn apart by the mecha's charge. In just one breath, the mecha had already rushed to Kun. Even though the mecha was nearly 100 meters tall, it was still very small in front of this giant beast. However, at this moment, the mecha bounced and suddenly reached out to grab a bone of the beast. Then the body suddenly sank and fell to the ground, and then pulled hard. Suddenly, the beast was pulled uncontrollably by the mecha and fell to the ground head first. This scene made everyone in the command center stare blankly. Someone even exclaimed, "Is that kid so strong?" Chapter 411, Boundary Wall Erosion. Normally, the size difference between the mecha and Kun was too big, and it was impossible to pull this beast, which was itself a forbidden land, down from midair and smash it to the ground. However, Kun's weightless force field made this scene possible. The size of this dominant beast was so huge that its head had already shoveled the ground, but its body was still floating in the air. However, Pan Crossing's mecha did not stop. After the purple god general mecha accumulated power slightly, it jumped up vigorously, crashed into Kun's several charred bones, and immediately entered Kun's body. Kun's remaining eyeball shrank suddenly, and the remaining anti-gravity organs and clusters on his body emitted strong light. An invisible gravity field in his body hit the mecha like a tide. The mecha exuded black breath from the gaps in the armor. Those breaths exuded a dead silence. After dispersing, the gravity field in Kun's body was weakened or even disappeared. As a result, the mecha opened a passage from the gravity wave. The surrounding gravity field still squeezed the space. Unfortunately, the mecha seemed to have opened a passage in the ocean, which was unobstructed. But a moment later, looking out from the panoramic window, Luo Yan saw a huge organ. It was so huge that it was beyond Luo Yan's field of vision. It expanded and contracted regularly, and seemed to be the heart of Kun. At this moment, Luo Yan heard another chuckle. He frowned, and a surge of anger surged in his heart. He was forcibly pulled and controlled by those black auras, which made him feel bad. At the moment, he operated the skills, and a few dragon scales appeared behind him. With a sudden pull, Luoyan grabbed a few strands of black aura and pulled them from the controller. Luoyan's red eyes were full of murderous intent, and he pulled hard to tear the black aura apart. At this time, Pan Crossing's mecha pounced on the huge organ in Kun's body, frantically tearing it with his hands, grabbing it with 5 fingers, poking into the organ, and pulling out a large piece of tissue. The mecha's arms flew, and in an instant, it had dug a hole in the organ. A large amount of blood gushed out like a flood, washing over the mecha's body. The mecha was covered in blood, and its eyes glowed red, like a demon. It suddenly jumped up, landed on a piece of tissue, raised its hands and swung them. Then it clenched its palms like a knife, and the black death energy scattered on the body suddenly gathered, condensing into a piece of black energy like a blade between its palms. The mecha pounced again, waving its hands, black light flashing, and death energy everywhere. A wave of black light flashed on the huge organ, and after the light disappeared, the organ began to dislocate and slide. Large chunks of tissue fell off and landed on the soft body below. The cut surfaces of these tissues were all coated with a layer of ink. The ink quickly eroded inward, causing the organ fragments to rot and disintegrate at a very fast speed, and finally turned into a pool of flesh and blood. Kun's pupils suddenly widened, and then his whole body twitched violently. The temperature in his body rose rapidly, and eventually a large amount of blood and water evaporated, and all the high temperature heat was expelled from his body. Immediately, thick smoke rose around the body of the overlord beast, and the thick smoke spread all around, covering the sky and the sun. At the same time, a part of Kun's body suddenly bulged, stretched rapidly, and pointed to the sky, like a gun barrel. Then the gun barrel trembled, and suddenly ejected something from it. That thing was accelerated to a terrifying value. The speed was so fast that it was difficult to catch. Under the cover of the thick smoke, it flew away in an instant, and the direction it swept away was just opposite to the location where Pan Jiuying and other mechs were located. After sending something out, Kun's golden eyeball quickly faded, turned grey, and slowly closed his eyes. In the Changping Corps headquarters, a monitor watched the spectrum signal of Kun disappear on the computer. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief, then looked up at the bridge and shouted, "Report. Overlord Behemoth." The signal disappeared. The headquarters was quiet for a moment, and then everyone cheered. Only Jiang Wuang looked solemn, leaned slightly out of the bridge, and shouted to the people below, "Open the data chart of the body of pilot Pan Crossing, and report the status of the body's boundary wall." After a busy period of time, the personnel below took a breath and shouted, "The body boundary wall of Pan Crossing's mecha has erosion, and the current erosion degree is 5%. Sure enough, Jiang Wuang shouted, "Connect me to the cab." Later, Jiang Wuang shouted, "Luoyan, get out of the cab quickly. Quick. Communications are being interfered with. Communications are being disturbed." The operator below responded, "Damn it." Jiang Wuang shouted, "Keep monitoring the boundary wall status. Tell me if it exceeds 18%. He picked up his phone again, dialed a number, and then shouted, "The boundary wall erosion phenomenon of the body has been found. The third level response procedure has been activated." Just as the Changping Corps was busy, inside the giant beast, Pan Crossing's mecha was looking up and roaring, but no sound came out. But at this time, from the gaps in the armor, there were clumps of things like biological tissues pouring out, and some of the outer armor arched, and there were actually bones sticking out from them. It seemed that some kind of creature was growing again. The alarm in the cab sounded loudly, and a holographic window appeared on the command console, showing a group of information. Alarm. Alarm. Boundary wall erosion phenomenon has occurred. Please driver leave as soon as possible. Boundary wall erosion progress, currently 7%. Luoyan looked at the information, a little confused, completely unaware of what it meant. He was pulling at the black auras, and was about to tear them apart, when he saw biological tissues pouring out of the cracks around the cab. They spread and formed a thin layer of flesh membrane, and approached the control console. What is this? Luoyan felt a chill on his back, and at this moment, a large amount of black death energy suddenly emerged from the command console. They condensed and coiled, turning into a terrifying, hideous face. It was so similar to the face that Luo Yan saw when he was empathizing with the mecha. At this moment, Luo Yan's whole body was hot, and a violent intention suddenly erupted, just like a sleeping beast that was provoked and finally woke up. Under the driving suit, dragon scales appeared on Luo Yan's body, covering his whole body in an instant. The whites of his eyes were dyed black, and his red eyes were bright, as if burning two balls of red flames. Hiss. Luo Yan exhaled a piece of hot air from his mouth, and amber light gas rose from the scales. They rose up and turned into a virtual image of a lizard dragon. As soon as the lizard dragon appeared, it pounced on the black human face and actually opened its mouth to bite it. With a flick of its head, it tore off a large piece of the demonic shadow, then swallowed the black air and roared at the demonic shadow in protest. Chapter 412. Isolation and Observation. Alarm. Alarm. Boundary wall erosion has occurred. Please get out as soon as possible. Boundary wall erosion progress is currently 8%. 9%. 10%. On the command console, the holographic screen kept giving alarms. The progress of boundary wall erosion was accelerating. More and more biological tissues were pouring out from around the cab and even on the ground. At the control console, the lizard dragon formed by the condensation of amber light pounced fiercely, constantly biting the breath on the black demon shadow. Just like swallowing toxins before, those black death breaths were swallowed by the lizard dragon and stored, and could be used by Luo Yan. The group of black demon shadows also roared silently, and tried to resist, but the lizard dragon was more powerful. In a short while, it bit the demon shadow into pieces. At this time, those black breaths could no longer form demon shadows, and the lizard dragon ate them with great relish. When the information on the holographic screen showed 12%, the black death breath on the command console had been swallowed up by the lizard dragon. There was no trace of black death energy on Luo Yan's hand. He immediately jumped up and moved away from the command console. At this time, he found that the biological tissues around the cab and on the ground had stopped emerging. And soon, these biological tissues died quickly, rotted, and finally turned into a pool of clear water. The rejection system of the mecha started automatically, allowing the clear water in the cab to be quickly discharged. Luo Yan finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the cab returning to normal. Next, he didn't dare to touch the mecha again. Luo Yan opened the cab, picked up the unconscious Pan Crossing, and left the mecha. The wind blew Luo Yan's hair, the sun was bright, and the smell of burning came from the battlefield. He and Pan Crossing came out of Kun's body. Although Kun's body was huge, it was missing a lot of flesh and blood. Even without the mecha, it was not difficult to leave. As soon as he came out of Kun's body, a scorching airflow came towards him. Luo Yan looked up and saw a vermilion mecha falling to the ground and folding its butterfly-like wings behind it. Then the mecha knelt on one knee on the ground, and the petite figure of Dragon Rider Pan Yu flashed several times before appearing in front of him. "Are you alright?" Pan Yu was about to take over her brother from Luo Yan when she heard a voice saying, "Pilot Pan Yu, please do not act rashly. Pilot Pan Crossing's body has just experienced boundary wall erosion. According to the regulations of the Giant Beast Strategic House, we must now implement the third level response procedure." This was Jiuying Wuoyang's voice. A convoy of vehicles was seen galloping over the ground, and Jiuying Wuoyang's voice sounded on the radio of one of the armored vehicles. Pan Yu's hand stopped immediately, and he turned around, watching as a number of chariots stopped, and a large number of soldiers in full body protective suits poured out of the vehicles. They were fully armed, ready for battle, and pointed their guns at Luo Yan and Pan Crossing. Pan Yu opened his arms, protected Luo Yan and the other two behind him and shouted, "Impossible. If there is erosion of the boundary wall, they can't get out of the mecha." In one of the tanks, Jiuying Wuoyang, who was also wearing a full body protective suit, walked down. That's because the phenomenon has been interrupted and stopped. The erosion progress finally stopped at 12%. Pan Yu blinked. As long as it doesn't exceed 18%, it's within the safety baseline. Yes, that's why I said that the third level response procedure is being implemented. If it exceeds 18%, then the cleanup procedure must be implemented. Jiuying Wuoyang looked at Luo Yan. "Student Luo, please believe that we have no bad intentions. We will explain to you later." but now, please cooperate with our work. We will take you and pilot Pan Crossing to a dedicated observation point and isolate you depending on the situation. At the same time, we will conduct a series of inspections on you. This set of procedures is stipulated by the Giant Beast Strategic Palace. I have reported the situation to the Strategic Palace and notified your Guangling Corps. I believe you will get the news soon. But now, please follow us. Pan Yu also put down his hand, turned his head, and looked at Luo Yan and said, "It's okay, you and your brother can go with them. I will supervise them throughout the process and will not let you have any accidents." Luo Yang nodded slightly, not to say that he believed Pan Yu's words, but he had just used the Wu Wang burning eyes to spy on Jiang Wuoyang's thoughts and confirmed that this chief of staff did not have any malicious intentions. So a moment later, Luo Yan was picked up, and he and Pan Crossing took a special vehicle separately. This vehicle has a vacuum isolation cabin, which is used to transport pollutants or radioactive materials. Luo Yan sat on a white chair, with circles of fire in his eyes. He used the Wu Wang burning eyes to observe the outside world, paying special attention to the thoughts of those transporting people. Once there is something wrong, he will activate the dragon transformation posture and resist with all his strength. However, it seems that he was too worried, and there was no abnormality in the whole process. After entering the underground city, Luo Yan and the others were sent to a building similar to a hospital, and underwent a series of examinations. Chief of the General Staff Jiang Wuoyang and Dragon Rider Pan Yu followed throughout the process. When the results came out, both of them breathed a sigh of relief. The results of the examination showed that Luo Yan and Pan Crossing were in good condition, and all indicators were within the safety line. Jiang Wuoyang put down the tablet and laughed. It seems that they should be fine. Next, we just need to conduct a mental examination on them and observe them for another week. If there is no abnormality, they can be released. Pan Yu nodded and said, "I want to meet my brother." Jiang Wuoyang said happily, "I will arrange it immediately." In the isolation room, Luo Yan was eating and observing the outside world with the Wu Wang burning eyes. There was also an observation room outside the room, so that the people inside could see him 24 hours a day. The thoughts of those people were normal, and they had no thoughts that were unfavorable to him. Luo Yan temporarily put his mind at ease, and the food in his mouth became more and more delicious. After a few hours, he was practicing, and his mind moved, and he stopped practicing. When he opened his eyes again, the door of the room opened, and a man in a full body biochemical suit walked in, and sat face to face with Luo Yan. The man smiled gently in his helmet. "Hello, Luo Yan. My name is Lei Wubang." After a pause, the man continued, "I have been appointed to ask you some questions, Mr. Luo." He paused again, as if he had some kind of obsessive compulsive disorder in this regard, and didn't like to speak coherently. Then, "Can you please tell me, did you feel anything unusual when you were empathizing with pilot Pan Crossing's mecha?" Luo Yang quietly opened the Wu Wang blazing eyes, paid attention to the other party's voice, and then said, "No." He did not forget that when he asked Wei Fenghua about the strange visions he saw when he was empathizing, Wei Fenghua said that other natural resonators did not have Luo Yan's situation. Therefore, Luo Yan would not tell the man in front of him what he saw. However, when he said this, Lei Wubang's voice suddenly amplified. He lied. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 413, The So-Called Boundary Wall. When Luo Yan saw this message, he was stunned. He didn't understand what Lei Wubang was basing his opinion on, so he was sure that he was lying. He thought about it, and before Lei Wubang could respond, he pretended to be in deep thought and said, "But I heard laughter, like a man's laughter." It sounded a little contemptuous and arrogant. After saying this, Luo Yan saw Lei Wubang's thoughts emerge again. That's right, the boundary wall erosion phenomenon cannot be without any abnormality. At the same time, Lei Wubang said, "Apart from laughter, was there anything else?" "Yes." Luo Yan raised his hands and said, my hands could not leave the controller at that time, and I saw a black breath appearing from the command console. Also, I was going to control the mecha to leave, but it lost control. It moved on its own, and destroyed Kun's organs. Lei Wubang took notes, nodded continuously, and asked, can you tell me about your mood at the time? Did you have the urge to destroy and kill? Luo Yan shook his head. I was very surprised, and, of course, very scared. But as for the impulse you mentioned, I didn't have it. Lei Wubang asked a few more questions, and finally, he said, you must be confused now. It doesn't matter, I will explain it to you next. But please remember, what you are going to hear next is top secret information, and cannot be leaked. If discovered, the strategic office will hold you accountable, and may subject you to severe discipline and punishment. Luo Yang nodded slightly. Lei Wubang continued, what you experienced in the mecha is an abnormal phenomenon called boundary wall erosion. The so-called boundary wall refers to a protective layer inside the mecha, between the skeleton and the cab. You can understand it as a protective device for a nuclear reactor. The boundary wall is a protective measure to prevent the driver from being eroded. Once it is eroded, you have seen the result. In addition, based on long-term observation and research on this phenomenon, the Behemoths Strategic Office has reached a conclusion. When the progress of boundary wall erosion is below 18%, it can be regarded as a safe value. Once the value exceeds 18%, it will have an irreversible effect on the mecha and the driver. You are lucky. The boundary wall erosion stopped at 12% and did not deteriorate further. So now, according to the procedure, you only need to be isolated and observed for a week, and then you can leave. Luo Yan thought of the biological tissues in the cab and asked, is the boundary wall a measure to prevent the erosion of certain biological tissues? How can there be biological tissue in a mecha? I remember that in the Ghost Hair City, when the mecha at the Black Hawk base was destroyed, biological tissue emerged from the mecha. At that time, Luo Yan asked Wei Fenghua about this question, but did not get a direct answer. Today, he encountered the phenomenon of boundary wall erosion again, and also discovered biological tissues. In addition to the images he saw during empathy, he even obtained the practice method of 10 directions Nirvana Spear. This made Luo Yan have a bold guess. Now, he hopes to get confirmation from Lei Wubang. Unexpectedly, Lei Wubang shook his head. This is not something you can know, and I suggest you forget your experience in the cab. It will not do you any good. Luo Yan observed his thoughts, but the man obviously did not think about the topic of biological tissues, but some irrelevant thoughts emerged. Okay, let's stop here for today. Lei Wubang stood up. Have a good rest. Your friends or colleagues will come to visit you in the afternoon. Remember, don't leak any information about boundary wall erosion. After Lei Wubang left, Luo Yan turned on the TV and watched the program in Changping City. Now, the channels in the underground city are all reporting on Kun's incident. It has been confirmed that this aerial overlord has died, and its huge corpse is on the ground less than 100 kilometers away from the underground city. The underground city is ready to recycle the materials of the giant beast. The amount of materials harvested from such a huge beast is unimaginable. For this reason, there are as many as 100 engineering teams just to recycle the materials of the giant beast, with a total of nearly 50,000 people. If the personnel of other projects are counted, then this aerial overlord will create 100,000 jobs. This is just the most conservative estimate. After all, the materials of the giant beast need to be recovered as soon as possible and preserved in a specific way. Then, time needs to be raced against time. Therefore, the number of people estimated by the underground city channel may be even higher. This is a carnival in the underground city. However, behind the carnival are the sacrifices of many mecha divisions and a large number of ground troops. In the afternoon, Luo Yan welcomed two visitors. Captain Yan Wenbo and third-year senior He Heo. One represents the Guangling Corps, and the other represents the Basin Academy. They cannot enter the isolation room wearing full-body protective clothing like Lei Wubang, and can only meet Luo Yan at the visiting window. Zhao Luo, how are you? Yan Wenbo looked pale as he looked up and down at Luo Yan, as if he was observing whether Luo Yan was being treated unfairly. Luo Yan nodded slightly. Not bad. Except for this. He raised his hand in a plaster cast. Yan Wenbo smiled and said, "I'm glad you're okay. When we first heard that you were controlled by Changping City, everyone was very excited. Your senior he almost fought with the people in Changping." Heo looked away. "It's not because of him. The main reason is that the people in Changping only say half of what they say, and I'm unhappy." Yan Wenbo shrugged his shoulders and didn't correct him. "Anyway, our Captain D called later and we found out that it was a normal procedure. Otherwise, several of us would have gone to the Changping court to make a fuss. There's no reason to come all the way to Changping for support, only to have our own brothers detained. However, the people in Changping refused to tell us what the so-called third level response procedure of the strategic office is." Luo Yan said in a deep voice, "I can't tell you either. They said it's confidential. If you leak it at will, I will be held accountable." Yan Wenbo laughed. "It doesn't matter. I'm not interested in confidential matters. As long as I know you're okay, it's fine." Heo knocked on the window and said, "They said you need to be isolated for a week. You're free anyway, so remember not to be lazy. If I catch up with you like this, I won't feel a sense of accomplishment." Luo Yan looked at him, then said, "I will soon reach the state of intermediate great perfection." Heo was stunned for a moment, then his face flushed. "Just wait, I don't believe I can't catch up with you." He stood up suddenly, as if he was going to leave, then patted his head, turned around and said, "Xiaobei asked me to tell you that she will stay and wait for you to come out. We will leave first tomorrow. We have classes at school." That's it. Chapter 414. Sword Shadow reappears. Several days passed in a blink of an eye. On this day, in the isolation monitoring room, several staff members looked at the shaking walls around them and the rumbling sound of the sea tide in the isolation room, and they all smiled bitterly. They knew that it was Luo Yan in the isolation room who was practicing. After a few days, they had become accustomed to the noise made by Luo Yan when he was practicing. The fluctuations of Yuanli were endless, like the raging waves of the sea, always shaking the building and shaking off wisps of dust. They looked into the isolation room and saw Luo Yan sitting cross-legged with the shadows of heavy mountains and blue seas around him, and the artistic conception was magnificent, making people forget to breathe. What they didn't know was that Luo Yan was worried that someone would see the shadow of his Yuanshan, so he deliberately suppressed it. Otherwise, they would see a more peculiar scenery. In the isolation room, Luo Yan was concentrating. At this moment, his Yuanli ocean was surging, forming a vortex, absorbing and gathering the Yuanli in the space, expanding this sea of Qi. Because he came to support this time, Luo Yan did not bring the Yuanpei agent with him. But even without the help of the Yuanpei agent, he now vaguely felt that he was about to hit a bottleneck. It would take a few more days to break through. Then he could exchange for another marrow washing agent, and then he could reach the great perfection within a week. Then, he could break through and advance to the advanced realm. After completing the practice, Luo Yan gradually stopped practicing the exercises, and the Yuanli ocean in his body gradually returned to calm. Luo Yan did not open his eyes at this point. He still stared at the Qi sea with the method of introspection. When the sea surface returned to calm, a shadow slowly emerged on the sea surface. Sword Shadow. The sword shadow found in Kun's body was now reflected on the surface of Luo Yan's Qi sea. This was a phenomenon that Luo Yan accidentally discovered when he was practicing a few days ago. Seeing it again today, he finally confirmed that it was not accidental. Thinking back to that day, after the Yuan Shem virtual shadow reached out to touch the sword shadow suddenly disappeared. Now it is projected in his own Yuanli ocean. This is definitely not accidental. The sword shadow, the long sword reflected on the sea, was of an ancient shape, with a sense of vastness. There were several mysterious symbols on the sword, which was exactly the same as what he saw that day. Luo Yan thought about it, and tried to control the sword shadow. He used the trick of practicing visualization, to visualize himself stretching out his arm, to pick up the sword shadow on the surface of the Qi sea. Such attempts lasted for a long time and all ended in failure. But Luo Yan was a tenacious man. He was not discouraged. He tried again and constantly adopted new methods. I don't know how long it took. In the isolation room, Luo Yan suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the shadow under him. His shadow was slightly blurred, with a bulge in one place, and gradually stretched. This change became faster and faster, and the stretched shadow gradually turned into the shape of a small sword. Suddenly, a sword shadow flashed out, broke away from Luo Yan's figure, and wandered around the room. The speed was so fast that ordinary people couldn't see it clearly. Luo Yan's mind moved, and the sword shadow returned to his figure. The next second, there was a loud cracking sound in the isolation room. Deep cracks appeared in the places where the sword shadow had swam before, which scared the people in the monitoring room. Luo Yan was also shocked. He had initially figured out how to control the sword shadow in the sea, and could separate a sword shadow from his own shadow. This sword shadow was just a pure shadow. Not to mention the mysterious symbols on the sword, even the appearance of the long sword could not be revealed. But this sword shadow could actually act on real matter, and cut and destroy them. This was something Luo Yan had never thought of before. The door opened, and an observer in protective clothing walked in. "What did you do?" Luo Yan said calmly, "Practice." The man thought about it, and thought that Luo Yan's practice made too much noise, and damaged the isolation room. He sighed and said, "Brother, you will be able to get out in 2 days. Don't practice, okay? We will change you a new room, and you can stay there for 2 days. Luo Yan nodded slightly. 2 days later, Luo Yan underwent another physical examination, and was told that he could leave. He breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, he could leave the isolation room. Then he got his clothes and changed them. When he walked out of the room, he saw that there were many people standing outside. First, Jiuying came over, shook Luo Yan's hand and said, "Thank you for your hard work, classmate Luo Yan. Your award has been confirmed, and the specific information has been sent to your mobile phone. Take a look. If there is anything wrong, come to the core to find me directly, and I will ask someone to help you recheck it." Luo Yan nodded, and then took his mobile phone from the Chief of General Staff. Jiuying smiled, and went back to the regiment. As soon as he left, Pan Yu, who was wearing casual clothes, came over. She held Luo Yan's hands tightly and said loudly, "Thank you for saving my useless brother." The girl raised her head and blinked her eyelashes. "If it weren't for you, my brother would be lying in the small wooden box now." She took out a box from her arms and handed it to Luo Yan. "Here are 3 yuan peiji, which should be helpful for your cultivation. My brother asked me to give it to you. Please accept it. The yuan peiji is a good thing." Luo Yan's eyes lit up, and he accepted it without any hesitation. "Then I'll leave first. I hope to see you again in the future." Pan Yu let go of Luo Yan's hand and skipped away. Hehe. That woman finally left. "Just say it. Why are you holding classmate Luo's hand?" Bei, who was not far away, pulled the rabbit ears on his hat, and said with gritted teeth, "Last time she hugged classmate Luo, and I didn't even hug her." Kang Shun next to him said with a helpless look on his face, "Xiao Bei, you talked too loudly. Everyone heard it." Hiss. Bei quickly covered his mouth. "Did I talk just now? Classmate Luo wouldn't have heard it, right?" While the two were talking, Dugu Changxin, with his long silver hair tied up behind his head, walked over and threw Luo Yan's dragon elephant to him. "The captain has taken the others back to Guangling first. Now you're fine. Let's go back, after getting the reward." Luo Yan glanced at Bei. "I will stay for a few more days. You go back first." He did not forget the agreement with Bei. Kang Shun came over and said with a smile, "In that case, we can stay together for a few more days and then go back together. Anyway, as long as we get back to the underground city before New Year's Eve, we just finished a large-scale battle and need to rest well, don't you think, Changxin?" Dugu Changxin said coldly, "It's up to you." Kang Shun patted Luo Yan. "Let's go, Xiao Luo. We have to celebrate today." Chapter 415 2 Trump Cards. Returning to Changping City again, Luo Yan looked out of the car window and found that it was very different from the last time he came. The battle was over, and Changping City had restored normal power supply, which made the underground city regain its vitality. It was no longer as dim and silent as before. In addition, People had left the shelter, and the streets and alleys were crowded with people, thus having a breath of life. Now Changping City is busy recycling materials from the Overlord Beast, and most people are working on the surface, so there will be fewer people in the underground city. Thinking of coming out of the isolation point, when the vehicle passed by the surface, Luo Yan saw that a huge scaffolding had been built at the place where Kun fell in the distance, and it was as busy as a real estate construction site. Luo Yan believed that what he saw was just the tip of the iceberg. After all, Kun was so big, the scene of the recycling work should be quite spectacular. This time, Changping City should spend a lot of money to pay the reward, but on Kun, all these efforts can be recovered, and even more will be obtained. Thinking of the reward, Luo Yan took out his mobile phone and opened the relevant information sent by the Changping Corps. The reward information is very detailed, marking Luo Yan's achievements and corresponding rewards. The details are as follows. In this battle, according to statistics, Luo Yan pilots eliminated 96 anchorhead giant fleas and obtained a total of 9.6 million work points. Worked together to kill the upper level giant beast Mirage Turtle and obtained 14 million work points based on the contribution. Solo kills the raccoon, the Gudio, and the Zishao snake and obtains a total of 9 million work points. Join the first stage of the battle against the Overlord Giant Beast and obtain 10 million work points. Destroy 53 anti-gravity organs and obtain a total of 5.3 million work points. Destroy 2 anti-gravity organ clusters and obtain a total of 20 million work points. Destroy a giant beast's nursery room and obtain a piece of divine weapon level for mecha equipment, which can be reported to the core after confirmation and issued within 3 working days. In total, pilot Luo Yan received 67.9 million work points and a piece of magic weapon level equipment in this battle. Please review carefully. If there are no problems, please reply to confirm so that the reward can be issued. 67.9 million work points and a piece of magic weapon level equipment. Although the reward items this time are not as many as before in the Misty Canyon. However, Luo Yan is not responsible for the main link this time. Moreover, in addition to these superficial gains, he also obtained the sword shadow in Kun's body, and when he was in sympathy with Pan Crossing's mecha, he obtained the practice method of the 10 directions silent spear. Before, he thought that, even if he obtained the practice method of the silent spear, he could not replicate the move that destroyed all enemies. But in the cockpit, the lizard dragon transformed by the amberlight gas swallowed a lot of dead air and now stored it. Once Luo Yan raises the silent fire, he will be able to use the silent spear in the dragon transformation posture. Of course, it goes without saying that, even if it can be used, the power will definitely not be as good as that of the demon god. But it is already a good harvest. However, it is still too early to use the silent spear. At least you have to wait until you enter the Tangsuan realm. In addition, Luo Yan thinks that the Kihei sword shadow should not be that simple. Next time, you can try to show the Phantom of the Soul to see if it can be used. If it can, he will have more cards. At this time, Base Atova pulled the rabbit ears on his hat and asked in a low voice, "Student Luo, let's go play together tomorrow?" Luo Yan confirmed the reward information, put away his phone, and nodded to show his agreement. Bei immediately laughed happily. Behind them, Kang Shun leaned over and asked, "Where are you going to play?" He said to Dugu Changsun next to him, "Let's go together." The silver-haired man closed his eyes and said, "I'm busy, you go if you want to go." Kang Shun laughed and said to Luo Yan, "It's not just your senior he who is stimulated by Zhao Luo. Changsun has also been practicing very hard recently." "Shut up, what nonsense are you talking about?" Dugu Changsun said unhappily. Kang Shun laughed and said to Bei, "I was just teasing you guys, I won't be a light bulb." Bei blushed immediately, but in the end he didn't invite Kang Shun to go out with him. On the second day, Luo Yan changed into casual clothes and took the dragon elephant. The dragon elephant was too heavy, so Luo Yan needed to make several dragon scales appear on his body and show a little dragon power before he could use it easily. The reason why he took the dragon elephant was not to defend against the enemy, but Luo Yan found that he needed to make several dragon scales appear when he took the dragon elephant, which helped him get used to the form of transformation into a dragon. After his body and mind gradually got used to this incomplete posture, when he used the transformation into a dragon posture, the time he could resist the malicious thoughts generated by that posture would become longer. Today, he had to go out with Bei and had no time to practice. Luo Yan didn't want to waste time, so he came up with this compromise. Carrying the dragon elephant, practicing the incomplete transformation into a dragon. Coming out of the dormitory prepared by Changping for these reinforcement, Luo Yan saw Bei. Today the girl still wore a rabbit hat and a pleated skirt with white silk, looking fresh and cute. In addition, Bei also carried a backpack, and no one knew what she was carrying. When she saw Luo Yan, she waved her arms vigorously. "Student Luo, here." A moment later, they got on the bus to Wanli Lake Scenic Area. In the car, Bei opened her backpack and took out a bag of potato chips from it. "Do you want to eat?" Luo Yan saw that she was looking at him expectantly, so he nodded. Bei immediately asked happily, "What flavor do you like?" "I have original flavor, tomato flavor, cucumber flavor, and barbecue flavor." Luo Yan was surprised and said, "You brought all potato chips in your bag?" Bei stuck out his tongue because of the weirdness. "I have few friends. Especially before I met Senior Yishan and the others, I basically lived alone. Because I was too bored. I like potato chips. They are crunchy when eaten, so I don't look too quiet." Looking at the girl's smiling face, Luo Yan was silent for a moment, then put his hand on her hat. "Come to me when you are bored in the future." Bei was stunned for a moment, then nodded vigorously. "Okay." At this time, they passed by the underground city's dark river. Under the sunlight projected by the holographic board above the underground city, the river water was shimmering, and on the grass on the river bank, someone was flying a kite. 2 of half-grown children chased a kite, running like crazy, and laughing carefreely. Bei leaned on the window, looking at the running little figures on the river bank, and said softly, "I remember when I was little, my father would take me to fly kites on weekends. I loved kites at that time. They flew so high and looked so free. You don't have to think about anything. You don't have to consider anything. Just ride the wind, fly high, fly far. Don't worry about flying away, because there is a line underneath that always pulls you tight and prevents you from flying away." Student Luo Yan, what about you? Do you like kites? Chapter 416. Eagle soars into the sky. Luo Yan did not answer. In fact, he did not like kites. Bei said that there was a string under the kite that could pull the kite tight and prevent it from flying far away. But Luo Yan did not like being pulled by the string. He preferred to be an eagle. The eagle soars in the sky. The sky is high and the earth is far away. Where can it not go? It can fly when it wants to and stop when it wants to. Isn't it freer than a kite? But he did not say it because Bei liked kites. Bei did not ask any questions. The girl's mind seemed to have shifted to other places. She took out large and small bags of potato chips from her backpack and let Luo Yan choose for himself. Luo Yan picked the barbecue flavor, which had a slightly smoky taste, and he liked it very much. The two of them ate potato chips and ignored the other passengers on the bus, who cast mixed glances. The bus stopped, and Wanli Lake was reached. Bei took out a small notebook and flipped through it, saying, "I've already prepared a guide. The internet says that there are 6 or 7 scenic spots worth visiting in Wanli Lake. Let's go to the gates to take pictures first. It's a must-visit place for tourists. Then we'll go to the main lake of Wanli Lake, where there are a large number of koi. When the fish go to the surface to look for food, the scene will be spectacular. There are also Penglay Valley, Dragonfish Island, and Shuaiyu Bay to visit. At noon, we'll go to Longman Bridge for dinner. There is fresh carp available every day. The dishes include grilled fish, sweet and sour carp, sour soup carp, braised, steamed, etc." Bei's words made Luo Yan's appetite grow. He wanted to eat fish. The two got out of the car and walked along the sign. Soon they saw the gate of Wanli Lake. The gate of this scenic spot is actually a stone archway with a classical shape. On it are 3 golden characters Wanli Lake written in a dragon-like and phoenix-like manner. Because the Chinese New Year is approaching, this scenic spot has been decorated. Big red lanterns are hung on the archway. From a distance, it looks very festive. Bei ran to the front door and asked Liu Yan to take a photo of her with her mobile phone. After taking several photos, the two entered the scenic area. Coming from the main door, there is a blue brick road with swaying trees on both sides. Originally, there should be many tourists in the scenic area at this time, but because a war just ended, there are not many people here today. On the trees on both sides, there are red lanterns or big red firecrackers for decoration. In addition, the scenic area is playing music with a very New Year atmosphere, and the air is already vaguely filled with the New Year atmosphere. Liu Yan's mind can't help but be dazed, thinking of the time before the giant beast disaster, when the new year was approaching. He should have returned to his hometown to prepare for the festival. Red walls, yellow tiles, white snow, lanterns, firecrackers, and red envelopes. Those things that were originally thought to be ordinary can now only be savored in memory. Student Luo, look, there are so many fish in the lake. After walking and stopping, they have arrived at the main lake of the scenic area. There are thousands of fish in the big lake, and groups of koi of all sizes keep emerging from the lake, beating the waves, which is really spectacular. On the lake shore, Bei's eyebrows were relaxed, and she laughed happily. At this moment, the girl's clear eyes and innocent expression were imprinted in Liu Yan's mind. Bei took out the feed prepared early in the morning, and threw a handful into the lake. The lake water suddenly seemed to boil, and the fish swam over one after another, filling the lake shore immediately. Bei ran over excitedly and put a handful of feed in Liu Yan's hand. You try throwing a handful too. Liu Yan didn't want to spoil her interest, so he nodded, and with a little effort, he sprinkled the feed on the lake. Suddenly, the handful of feed flew out and fell all over the lake. The fish scrambled to splash, causing many tourists on the shore to exclaim and laugh. While Liu Yan and the others were swimming in the lake, a figure appeared at the entrance of an alley in the underground city. Wan Hui, a soldier of the Changping City Ground Corps, was carrying large and small bags of New Year's goods and a children's bicycle. He looked complicated and hesitated to walk into the alley. The alley was winding, the path was wide and narrow, and the ground was uneven. It was high here and low there. Above the alley, there were randomly distributed electric wires, like a net, trapping the people below. The walls on both sides of the alley were mottled, with moss growing at the base of the walls. Various small advertisements were posted on the walls. Sparrows jumped on the walls and suddenly flew up, flashing above the low buildings. A few children were laughing and chasing each other in front. Occasionally, a man in old clothes would ride a bicycle and smoke a cigarette, slowly coming out of the alley. Wan Hui took a deep breath, holding the New Year's goods and bicycle tightly, and finally took a step into the alley. Then he walked in, deep into the alley, and came to the door of a house deep in the alley. The door of that house was open, and white lanterns were hung on both sides of the door, with a black word written on it. The black words on the white paper were shocking. Wan Hui's eyes suddenly turned red. This was the home of his fallen comrade, Liu Shan. Liu Shan's funeral had been held a few days ago, but until today, the white lantern on the door had not been removed. Without entering the yard, Wan Hui could already feel the invisible but heavy sadness emanating from the door. Right at the door, there was a grey-haired old man sitting against the door frame, his eyes empty, holding a cigarette in his hand, but the cigarette burned quietly, and he didn't take a puff. That was Liu Shan's father. Liu Shan's wife died in the giant beast disaster, and only his son and father survived. But now, the white-headed man sent the black-headed man away. Only the grandfather and grandson are left in this family. Wan Hui coughed dryly. Uncle, it's cold outside. Come sit inside. The old man raised his head, and his turbid eyes moved at this time, and then gradually became focused. He tried hard to show a smile on his face, but the smile was uglier than crying. It's Jiuying. Come, sit inside. The two entered the house and saw Liu Shan's 7-year-old son standing in front of his father's black and white photo. Hearing footsteps, the little boy turned around and looked at Wan Hui in a daze. Uncle Wang, when will my dad come back? When the child asked, Wan Hui burst into tears. He bit his lower lip tightly, biting it until it broke and bled, but he didn't let himself cry. Xing Feng, your father went to a very far place. He can't come back for the time being. Look, he asked me to buy you a bicycle. In a few steps, Uncle will teach you how to ride a bicycle, okay? The little boy looked at his father in the photo, and then asked, is it because I learned to ride a bicycle that my dad will come back? Wan Hui hesitated for a moment before nodding. The next day, in an officer looked at Wan Hui. Why do you want to be transferred to the Mecha Corps? Wan Hui clenched his fists, looked at the officer, and answered loudly. I want to learn how to pilot a mecha. I want to kill all the beasts, sir. The officer stared into his eyes for a moment, then stamped a red seal on the application form. There were 2 big words on it, agreed. Chapter 417, Depth of Resonance. A few days later, Luo Yan and his companions returned to Guangling. The rewards had been distributed. Now Luo Yan's personal account had tens of millions more. However, in order to repair the Bayan, Luo Yan spent another 2 million work points. In addition to the work points, the reward also included a divine weapon level equipment. Luo Yan chose a large shield. The shield was named Zuanwu, and it was made of Zuanwu refined iron produced in Gixu. This special metal has natural cracks. The weight of the shield made is less than half of that of Taishan, but the hardness is several times that of Taishan. In addition, stimulating Zuanwu with Yuanli will stimulate a barrier similar to Kanbi, but the defense is better than Kanbi, and once stimulated, 36 layers of overlapping invisible barriers will be generated. And it can be concentrated in one place as needed, or spread around the mecha to form a full-dimensional 3-dimensional protection. After returning to Guangling, Luo Yan directly sent the mecha to the upgrade warehouse of the academy, wanting to find Ziguangaiao to upgrade the mecha. But unfortunately, Ziguangaiao was on vacation, so he had to give up for the time being. Afterwards, Luo Yan went to Wei Fenghua to report his progress in cultivation. In the office of the director of the teaching department, Wei Fenghua coughed twice, took out 2 capsules, and swallowed them with water, and said with a smile, I've heard about your story. I didn't expect you to encounter the boundary wall erosion phenomenon. I thought that even if you did, it would take many years. After all, only a general level machine can experience this phenomenon. For machines of other levels, the probability of boundary wall erosion is the same as buying a lottery ticket. Luo Yan asked casually, why is it that only a general level machine will experience boundary wall erosion? Wei Fenghua coughed twice again and said, let's talk about this later. Luo Yan didn't ask any more questions, and instead said, teacher, I will be able to break through in a few days. I exchanged a bottle of marrow cleansing agent from the strategic palace, and I should be able to complete my great perfection in cultivation after the new year. Wei Fenghua nodded. Very good. The school promised before that it would teach you advanced exercises. During this time, I will look for some for you. What do you think? Luo Yan thought for a while and said, I think the next exercises will be able to increase the lethality as much as possible. Okay. Wei Fenghua did not object. Viewing mountains and seas has laid a foundation for you, and coupled with your fighting style, it is normal to choose exercises that can increase lethality. I know how to choose for you. Wei Fenghua smiled and said, you are very lucky. The erosion of the boundary wall stopped at 12%. You should know that after something like that happened, not many people are as lucky as you. You are one. Dizeng is also relatively lucky. At least he can still drive the mecha. Luo Yan's eyes moved. Captain D, has a similar thing happened to him? Wei Fenghua nodded. Yes, but he was rescued at the baseline of 18%. In addition to some kind of force leaking and penetrating the body, the erosion of the boundary wall will also affect the driver himself. When the boundary wall erodes, the empathy between the driver and the mecha is also deepening. Normally, when we drive a mecha, it is enough to keep the empathy rate at 100%. But when the boundary wall erodes, the empathy rate will continue to rise, and the empathy between the mecha will continue to deepen. Luo Yan remembered that Lei Wubang had asked about his mental state in Changping before, so he asked, will excessive deepening affect the mental state of the mecha pilot? Yes. Wei Feng Hua's face became a little solemn. Just like when actors act, excellent actors will put themselves into the role so that the role becomes flesh and blood. But in this way, sometimes these excellent actors may be too deep into the role and cannot distinguish between reality and illusion. The same is true for deepening empathy. If the empathy rate is too high, the mecha pilot will not know whether he is a human or a mecha and will become mentally ill. The safety baseline of 18% is both the maximum degree of erosion that the boundary wall can withstand and the maximum depth of empathy that the mecha pilot can withstand. 220%. Once this empathy depth is exceeded, even if you are rescued, you will be required not to drive a mecha in the future, even if it is a mecha below the god general level. Wei Fenghua looked out the window. In addition, if the empathy depth is too high, it will cause some irreversible effects on the mecha pilot's body. Otherwise, Dizeng's realm would not stop at Tongsun. In that case, he would have joined the Xiangang Dragon Riders long ago. After a pause, Wei Fenghua smiled and said, "Let's not talk about this anymore. You just came back, so have a good rest. New Year's Eve is in a few days. At that time, the college will prepare a New Year's Eve dinner for the teachers and students who stay on campus. If you can cook, you can show us your skills." Luo Yan nodded, said goodbye and left. 2 days later, he got a bottle of marrow cleansing agent exchanged from the strategic house. After taking it, he entered the intermediate great perfection state. In a blink of an eye, it was New Year's Eve. The college had already been on vacation, and most students went home on their own. There were also students like Luo Yan, Bei and some who wanted to stay in school, to continue practicing and studying. Today in the dormitory, the students who stayed in school were busy pasting the Spring Festival couplets distributed by the college on the doors of their dormitories. Luo Yan also got a couplet. The upper couplet is spring returns to the earth and people live longer. The lower couplet is blessings come to the world and the door is glorious. And the horizontal banner is 4 seasons are auspicious. He pasted the couplets and was about to go to the training hall to practice. When he passed by the logistics department, he was stopped by someone. "Zhao Luo, come here." Luo Yan turned around, and it turned out to be Shi Haoting from the Pharmaceutical Research and Development Department. Shi Haoting had previously drawn several tubes of Luo Yan's blood to research the antidote for the red poison. He didn't know how the research was going, so Luo Yan walked over. The weather was cold, and Shi Haoting finally stopped wearing slippers. He also changed his hat into a felt hat, and there was still a small golden abacus hanging on his waist. He pulled Luo Yan up and said, "Come on, I'll show you my latest research results." When they came to Shi Haoting's private laboratory behind the logistics department, he saw several computers that were turned on, and on the screens were all kinds of data and charts that he couldn't understand. Shi Haoting pounced on one of them. "During this period, I studied the red poison in your blood. Although I didn't develop an antidote, I found that there are certain ways to block the red poison from attacking the heart and brain. In this way, although the red poison still exists, you can survive with the poison." Luo Yan's eyes lit up when he heard this. If that was the case, he wouldn't have to worry about a secondary infection taking his life at any time. Shi Haoting turned around and said, "However, I have always used animals for research and have not conducted any human experiments, so I can't guarantee that it will work on you." Shi Haoting took out a bottle of medicine and said, "So, it's up to you to decide whether to use this bottle of blocker. But if you want to use it, you must notify me. I want to collect real-time data and also observe the changes in your body. If there is any abnormality, we can intervene in time." Chapter 418 Night Banquet. In the end, Luo Yan still did not decide to use the blocker immediately, and he kept the medicine in Shi Haoting's hand first. Anyway, he had to notify him when he needed to use it, so Luo Yan did not put it in his pocket directly. At night, someone started fireworks at the entrance of the college cafeteria. When Luo Yan arrived, monotonous fireworks exploded in the sky above the cafeteria. But the students below were watching with great joy. Luo Yan also stopped to watch for a long time. Such a scene was completely unimaginable before he entered the underground city. After all, if fireworks were set off on the surface at night after the giant disaster, it would be like telling the giant beasts or parasites that there is food here. Student Luo. Bei found Luo Yan and ran over. The girl put her hands in her pockets and exhaled a breath of hot air. Why did you come just now? We have finished making dumplings. Luo Yan had been practicing all afternoon, so naturally he didn't know that Bei and the others were making dumplings in the cafeteria. At this time, the fireworks were over, and the students swarmed into the cafeteria like bees. Luo Yan followed in, and had a New Year's Eve dinner with Bei and others. After the meal, he did not stop, changed into a red ghost, and came to Jude restaurant. Luo Yan came to a private room in the restaurant, which was not open to the public. It was mainly for the leaders of the Red Gate to have a reunion and dinner here. When Luo Yan was brought in by Wenzhou, Wei Junai, Shaniying, Yang Heo, and even Guan Peng from the Iron Horse were invited. In the crowd, Yang Tao's small figure huddled in the corner. The little girl seemed restrained. When she saw Luo Yan, she immediately stood up and called him teacher. Luo Yan nodded to her and sat next to her. With Luo Yan by her side, the little girl was much braver, and her eyes gradually had lightened smiles. Luo Yan sat down, looked around, and raised his glass, saying, "Everyone has worked hard this year." Wenzhou laughed. "You're joking. Following me, everyone enjoys delicious food and drinks. How can it be hard?" Guan Peng raised his glass and said, "Thanks to Mr. Chigi, our Iron Horse has not only been able to survive, but has also grown a lot. Mr. Chigi, I toast to you." After Luo Yan drank a glass with him, he asked, "How many people have you added?" Guan Peng said, "The purpose of our Iron Horse has always been to value quality over quantity. The number of people has not increased much, only a dozen, but they are all good guys. By the way, Mr. Chigi, the thing you asked me to do last time has already been figured out. I found a seller who has a mecha driving simulation cabin and is willing to sell it for 3.5 million. As for the mecha instructor, I mentioned it to him, but he didn't seem very willing. He said he wanted to meet you before making a decision." Yang Heo, whose hand was chopped off by Luo Yan, snorted coldly upon hearing this. "Who is so arrogant? Mr. Guan, give me the address and I will catch him immediately." Luo Yan glanced at him and said, "Drink your wine." Yang Heo laughed dryly and picked up the wine glass to drink. He was famous for being crazy, but Luo Yan had chopped off his soul with a knife before. In front of Luo Yan, he did not dare to be presumptuous. Luo Yan said calmly, "No problem, I will find you when I have time in the next few days. You show me the way." Guan Peng immediately said, "Okay." Wei Junai said at this time, "Master, Liu said that someone from Huangquan has appeared recently at the coyote camp, but it is not Jiuying from before, but his subordinates." Liu used words to stabilize Huangquan, but it is said that Jiuying will go to the camp after the new year. Luo Yang nodded slightly. "Tell him to notify me before the people from Huangquan come." Wei Junai nodded. Wenzhou also said at this time, "Master, at the Yinwen base, Baldu Bei asked me to tell you that the business of the surnamed Liu in the underground city has been almost completely divided up. Because he is in the base, he can't reach them and can only give verbal warnings, but those people don't seem to take it seriously. He asked you how you plan to deal with it." Luo Yan said in an orderly manner, "After dealing with the coyote camp and cutting off the claws of Huangquan, I will go to the Yinwen base." "Okay, I'll send him a message later." Wenzhou said again, "Later, Master, you have a dinner party. Do you remember the New Year's Eve banquet?" Luo Yan nodded. It was a grand event jointly held by the Guangling Underground Organization, aimed at demarcating the business areas of the sphere of influence of the major organizations in the next year. "What time does it start?" Luo Yan asked. Jiuying said, "The New Year's Eve banquet will be held at 12 o'clock in the morning. It's almost enough for us to arrive before 11 o'clock. After hearing this, Luo Yan had a bottom line in his heart. At this time, Wenzhou smiled and said, "It's still early before 11 o'clock, sir. Have a few bites of food first." After Luo Yan ate a little, he took Yang Tao away. The two came to the quiet room, and Luo Yan said, "Practice. Let me see how you practice." The young girl with a green face immediately practiced the skills and released the energy fluctuations. Her cultivation was still shallow, and the energy fluctuations were very weak. However, judging from the time of practice, Yang Tao's performance was not bad. Luo Yan nodded. Not bad. Next, I will teach you the second level of cultivation. When you reach the third level, I will teach you secrets and combat skills. Now, in addition to practicing the skills, you should practice basic fighting skills, master various firearms, and practice gun skills. I will have someone to teach you about the latter. Yang Tao nodded vigorously, clenched a small fist and said, Teacher, Yang Tao will work hard. I want to help you, as soon as possible. Seeing her positive attitude, Luo Yan smiled in his mask and said, Don't worry, there will be a time when you will be useful. Now, what you need to do is to lay a good foundation. Do you understand? The little girl nodded. Yang Tao understands. Soon it was late at night. Luo Yan saw that the time was almost up, so he led Wen Zhao and Yang Hao and asked Yang Hao to bring 10 good players and then set off to the New Year's Eve banquet site. The scene of the New Year's Eve banquet was in Temple Street. The streets here were cleared and round tables were placed. People from various organizations and gangs in the underground city sat on the tables. When Luo Yan and others walked through the street, the burly men at the round tables turned their heads and looked at them, casting various meaningful glances. Wen Zhao whispered, according to Jiuying, every year at the New Year's Eve banquet, in order to gain the greatest benefits, the major gangs will bring as many of their own people as possible to show the strength of the organization. Master, we still brought too few people. Luo Yan said lightly in the mask, no matter how many rabbits there are, they still have to turn around and run when they meet wolves. What's the use of having more people? It's not difficult to kill them all. Yang Hao, who was listening nearby, had a fierce look in his eyes. He felt that Luo Yan's words touched his heart, and he laughed dryly twice. Wen Zhao felt a chill on his back, and felt that the murderous aura of the captain of Team 7 was really increasing day by day. Chapter 419. Not killing enough. There was a large round table on the Temple Street Square. People were already sitting around it, but there were still several empty chairs. Sitting next to the round table, an old man with grey hair, and wearing reading glasses, and holding a small pipe said softly, Are you really going to do this? In my opinion, this is still a bit inappropriate. The Red Ghost took less than half a year to subdue the Huashan, and not long ago, it also swallowed up the Jiuying group. The old man exhaled a puff of smoke, and looked at the small temple behind. That night, many people died here. I don't think that Red Ghost is that simple. Across the round table, a fat man in a black suit and red shirt slapped the table. He wore 3 gold rings on his fat hands, and the aura of an Avo-Rish came towards him. Uncle Yap, you're old and as timid as a mouse. Who the hell is the Red Ghost? Even if he didn't do the Huashan, I, Zuru Heo, will make Lei Laoki eat shit. Sitting next to the fat man, a man in his 30s, with blackened areas around his eyes and a strong smell of perfume, laughed. Fatty Zoo, you will die if you don't brag for a day. With such a small number of people in your Yisheng, you dare to challenge old Ghost Lei. If it weren't for Boss One protecting you, you would have been dead long ago. Zuru Heo looked at the man next to him suddenly. Ding ding Gao, don't think that you are so awesome just because your name has the word Ao in it. You look down on us Yisheng, then what are you? Ding Shengxing? You are nothing but a dog raised by those women in Jiufeng. The man named Ding Ding Gao immediately slammed the table and stood up. Fatty Zoo, say it again, if you have the guts. Zuru Heo was about to speak when he heard a voice saying lightly, okay, it's New Year's Day, calm down. It was a middle-aged man with silver hair on his temples, a mustache, his eyes closed, and a pair of iron gallbladders in his hands. Ding Ding Gao glanced at the middle-aged man, sat down and said with a smile, for Mr. One's sake, I won't argue with Fatty Zoo. This Mr. One, whose full name is Wan Sheng, is the leader of the underground organization Black Owl in Guangling City. He is ruthless and decisive, and is a well-known figure in the underground city. Wan Sheng opened his eyes were sharp. The Red Ghost has risen too fast. His Red Gate has expanded rapidly in just half a year. The reason why we have united to sanction him this time is very simple. If we leave it alone, maybe everyone here will have to work for him next year. Uncle Yao's concerns are not unreasonable. Of course, I also know that the Red Ghost is not a simple character. But after uniting the forces of our companies, are you still afraid that he will not bow his head? At this moment, a man with a blank expression and a cold look sitting next to Uncle Ya slowly spoke. Has Yimei of 9 Phoenix expressed her position? Although they are all women, it is undeniable that Yimei and her sisters are all masters. If they have expressed their opinions, then tonight is a sure thing. Otherwise, please forgive us Dark Blood for not interfering. Wan Cheng frowned and said, Brother Yuzun, it's not good to say this now, right? Although Boss Yi didn't make a clear statement, 9 Phoenix said that their representatives will appear in the evening. Isn't that enough? Yuzun raised his head and said seriously, not enough. Wan Cheng was about to say something when someone came up to him and whispered something. The leader of the Black Owl raised his head and said, the people from the Red Gate are here. Then he stood up and said, let's go. They are the new nobles of the underground city. No matter what, we have to show our attitude. Welcome, welcome. Under the leadership of Wan Cheng, one figure after another stood up and left the round table with him. Soon they saw a group of people coming. The man walking in the front was wearing a cloak and a wooden mask of Nuo opera. When Wan Cheng and others were observing Luo Yan was also looking at them. The only difference from those people on the opposite side was that Luo Yan opened the Wu Wang burning eyes and took in all the information of those people. In his field of vision, it was obvious that among the big bosses of these organizations, Wan Cheng and Yuzun were the strongest. The former was at the 5th level of the intermediate level, and the latter was at the 4th level of the intermediate level. Such strength, even in the army, can be called elite. However, these two people have combat power, but no secret methods or unique skills. So in Luo Yan's eyes, they are just two heads that can be chopped off at any time. This is also the difference between military personnel and civilian talents. After all, it is very difficult for the leaders of these civilian organizations to get in touch with secret methods and unique skills. At this moment, Luo Yan's heart moved slightly, and his eyes glanced to the side, and a white figure passed by. It was a woman with straight black hair and a white long dress. Luo Yan's eyes changed slightly. It turned out to be an old acquaintance. Xing Feng, Guan Qi. There were two women beside Guan Qi, both of whom were Xing Feng's killers, with combat power of the 4th and 5th levels respectively. With such strength, in this area of the old city, you can almost walk sideways. At this time, Guan Qi also looked over, and Luo Yan quietly appeared a few dragon scales behind him, which made his eyes more fierce. In addition to making Guan Qi's eyes change slightly, revealing a fearful look, he also slightly changed his aura, making it difficult for Guan Qi to recognize him. All these happened in the blink of an eye. Although the Black Owl Wan Cheng had rich experience, he could not see much in this short time. He thought Guan Qi only looked at the red ghost, and did not think that there were many inside stories. The corners of his mouth slightly raised, but he did not laugh. He said very implicitly, the Red Gate and the 9 Phoenix have come together. This year is lively. Please, both of you. Wan Cheng turned sideways, and the crowd immediately split in the middle, and a passage appeared. Luo Yan strode forward, without thinking too much, and passed Wan Cheng in a flash. Wan Cheng's face changed slightly, but he did not get angry. Instead, the fat man named Zuru Heo snorted. Do you know the rules? You, the Red Gate, are not so arrogant. Everyone here today is equal. Besides, you are the youngest here. What qualifications do you have to walk in front of Mr. Wan? Quickly step back. You don't know the difference between seniority and inferiority, and you dare to come to the night banquet. Ha. Luo Yan looked at the man in surprise. He thought that he came to Guangling as a red ghost, killed Lei Qi, and built the Red Gate. There should be many people who died in his hands, but this man is not even at the intermediate level. How dare he yell at him? He sighed softly in the mask. After all, I haven't killed enough. When Wenzhou heard this, his back suddenly felt cold. After thinking for a while, he whispered, Master, today is New Year's Eve. It's unlucky to see blood on a good day. Luo Yan glanced at him. Wenzhou was about to scold himself for being too talkative, but unexpectedly, Luo Yan nodded slightly and agreed. This made him a little flattered. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.